Normally, it's part of the Ballantine's range of malts. So normally, if we're doing a tasting that involves Glenburghie, it's along with Milton Duff and Glentochers and maybe a Scapa.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. Yeah, as a breakdown, and then yeah. I'm trying not to ask all my questions before we've even started, so I'll just.
Yeah, don't ask them all at once.
Hey, Adrian.
Hi, good evening.
Hey, mate, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. And yourself?
I haven't seen you for ages since you you gave up drinking.
Action.
Yeah.
Coming in thick and fast now.
Oh, all the superstars are in. Kenny's in, Stephen's in, Will's in.
So we got a few no-shows tonight. Hey, Will, I think Fee, Nick,
Phil.
And Phil, right?
Ryan as well, I think.
And Ryan?
Yeah.
He can't make it?
No, he's got some family stuff to deal with.
Okay.
I think Ben's in though, right?
I think Ben will be. I think he's tidying up his kitchen. The last I had, I still have to clean the kitchen up.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, what's this little chat that you're on?
Tomorrow with McMira, yeah. Richard got on to me. Basically, he was looking for some kind of mad brands to celebrate International Whiskey Day. So pretty big coup for us to be in there alongside McMira and Westland and Paul John Distillery. So pretty chuffed to have been asked on. I was kind of like to Richard, are you sure you want us to come on? Which I think it's just relaxed virtual pub, jamming a chat, just chatting about whiskey and all things whiskey. So, and I think Richard's going to lead it, so it should be good crack because he's great crack.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah, he actually sent me out a nice bottle of the Svenska Ek today that I'm going to be tasting along with him. So the one finished in the Swedish oak. I think we had that in our tasting. Nice little spice to it.
No, we had a slightly different one in the tasting. We had I can't remember what it was. Prince-esque rock, maybe.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh, it was the Amerikansk Ek. That's what it was.
I'm trying to find a photo here, but
Ben's Rock Amerikansk Ek.
Alex has probably got it written down in the blog somewhere.
Yeah.
Must have been a while back. No, McMara wasn't too far ago, was it?
February, March? February, January.
30th of January it was.
It's all just blended together, hasn't it?
Svensk rock. That's what you're talking about. Yeah. Intelligence, Winterglad, Gruvgold, Appleblom, Skåtedid, and Svensk rock. Amerikanas. My Swedish isn't very good. So I think we're still waiting for a couple more, Will.
Who've we got? Ben and
I've got 12 at the moment. I think you had 20, right?
We had 12. So Ryan, Fee, Phil, Rob.
No.
Who else was there? Sure.
11.
Right, so meet up. There are. So Chris, who's in, Lewis, he's missing an action.
Yeah.
He said he might be later on as well.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Chris A. Hart, Chris Moore, Simon Allen, he's not in. Nick Foster obviously is out. Kenny's in. Johnny Hall. Johnny's not in. Simon's in. Phil's meant to be here.
All right. So if you want to just leave it till 35, Will, and
Yeah, we'll give him a few
to catch
minutes.
up.
Let's see your spanking new kitchen, Ben.
No, this is conservatory now. It's been clean though.
Good to hear it.
How is everybody?
Good.
All fine here.
Yeah, I got my first COVID vaccine on Wednesday and I've been off work since. Felt as if I've been kicked about the street quite a bit, to be honest with you. My sore head has just went away in the last hour and a half, 2 hours. I was fine on Wednesday night, but yesterday I was absolutely done in, and today I was absolutely done in. So hopefully I'll get better in the next couple of days.
Well,
Whiskey
I
will
get
help.
mine on Sunday.
You what?
I get mine on Sunday.
Yeah, it was AstraZeneca I got, and it did tell you might get a sore head or temperature or flu-like symptoms, but I thought I'd got over it, and I thought I hadn't got it until probably 8 o'clock yesterday morning. I felt as if I'd been knocked down by a bus.
And the wife gets a second one tomorrow.
Right.
Would you get pushed through for your second quickly, Wayne? Because if you've got to go back to sea, you could potentially be away, couldn't you?
Possibly, yeah. I need to speak to them and ask them if there's any way of getting it early. Otherwise, I'll just have to see when you can get it. Might have to take it after 12 weeks. Because I'm when I'm due for my second dose, I'll probably be out the country.
Was anyone successful with the Springbank today?
I just went in for that the ballot in
Whiskey Exchange?
Whiskey Exchange, yeah.
Yeah, I did the same.
I
I
didn't
couldn't believe how quickly they went off. That was 5:45 this morning. Tyndrum's put theirs on it and it was gone by 5:46. I don't know who's up at 5:45 to actually get
The bots.
buy whiskey, unless it's computers and bots. And by 10 seconds after 10 o'clock, the Cadenhead shop had sold out. And I phoned them and they said they had some bottles, but they were just for people from Campbelltown and they were selling them to them, but they weren't doing any over the phone, which is disappointing.
Well, I guess we'll hand it over to you now then, Will. I think any stragglers I'll let in and we'll have to catch up. I think we've probably got most people.
Yeah, enough. Yes, thank you for turning up, gents. We have Tristan here from your Shivers brand ambassador, global brand ambassador.
Yeah, for Shivers Brothers, yep.
Yep, who will be taking us through the 5 whiskies. I've only tried 2 of them, so I hope they're all good. If they're not, it's Glenburghie's fault, not mine. Yeah, so it should be good fun, hopefully.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Will, and thank you all for joining us. And I would like to say, if they're not any good, it's to do with the independent bottlers, because of course, all the spirit from Glenburghie will be top notch. So, the scene behind me, the little 2-story house. If I just move over a little bit, you might see a warehouse there. In below the steps. That's the oldest building at Glenburghie Distillery. It's called the Customs House. I'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but just in case you wonder why I picked that particular background, there's a warehouse below it. It's actually our smallest bonded warehouse that only holds about probably about 140 casks, somewhere around that, so not very much. I spoke to Will through the week, and I did say to him, I don't like to go too far into these things without having a dram, and I'm quite thirsty myself. So let's just start with a dram. And we thought the best one to start on would be the lowest strength, and that happens to be the distillery bottling, which is the 15-year-old at 46%. So why not start in that? As it's the distillery bottling as well, it maybe gives us a nice base to work from. And from that, then we can assess the other Glenburgies from the independent bottlers and see how they have played tunes with the new make spirit in their different casks to bring out different flavours. So let's take a look at it first of all. Oh, this background's playing havoc here. Lovely golden colour, just what we'd expect really from a nice 15-year-old. It is our policy with Glenburghie for most of it to be filled into American oak barrels. So I hazard a guess that this is probably what we have here. So let's go in the nose. I've not actually tried this particular one yet, but here we go. Okay. Sweet, isn't it? There's a lovely sweetness and fruitiness from this. Of course, Glenburghie, as you are all probably no doubt aware, it is a Speyside whiskey, so we would expect that sweet fruitiness as well. I'm actually quite surprised how similar this is to our current 15-year-old Glenburghie. You're getting those sort of blackcurrant flavours, a big blackcurrant note coming through in this for me. Let's have a taste.
So Tristan, can I ask, because I mean you've been at Chivas, I was checking you out. I think it's more than 13 years, I think, but you would
14 years next month.
14 years. So you wouldn't have been. I mean, this was bottled in 2000. So 15 years.
2002, I think it was bottled.
2002. So this would have been 80s distillate. Would this have been matured in a kind of mix of bourbon and transport sherry casks?
To the taste there, I would say yes. That's not our policy today with Glenburghie. For the most part, you'll get the odd exception to that for particular products. But certainly if we were tasting the 15-year-old Glenburghie that we bottle today, which isn't instantly recognizable, by the way, as a single malt Glenburghie because it's branded Ballantine's. So you might look at that in a shop or at the duty free and think, well, there's Ballantine's blended Scotch. But it is a single malt because we've released the key malts as single malts with the Ballantine's branding. So today we would just be filling in to the Ballantine's 15-year-old American oak. But this does taste
Hey, made it, Nick.
You've got caramel coming through there.
Yeah.
There's a little, maybe slight hint of sort of struck match at the back, which is a kind of that's a sign of a sherry cask that's maybe not optimum quality sherry cask. And if we were going back to the 80s, that was probably the quality of sherry casks you were getting. And very, very different to how we manage our sherry casks today. And if you go back to stock from the 80s and 90s, you'll probably find a lot of that. Sherry cask whiskies, maybe it's got that struck match, wee bit of burnt rubber or damp cloth, something like that. Well, the difference is today, if we were bringing in sherry casks to Scotland for filling, what we would do is, first of all, we have them made in Spain. There are casks made with Spanish oak by a cooper to our specification. Then we give them to our sherry bodega, who we work with. They fill sherry into them. Again, it's sherry to our specification. It's usually Oloroso, a little bit of Pedro Jimenez, but mostly Oloroso. And then once the sherry has finished maturing, those casks are emptied into a shipping container, and they're on the boat within 48 hours of being emptied. They're only transported from Spain to Scotland in the middle of winter. And within 24 hours of arriving in Scotland, they've got whiskey in them, or new make spirit in them. And that is what you have to do if you want to avoid subprime sherry casks. You need to get them here quick in winter, when they won't be affected with drying out or anything like that. And you need to get the whiskey and the spirit into them quickly as well, because once
of course,
they start,
sorry, because you can't import sherry. Well, you could, but you can't call it sherry, and it would cost too much, and the weight and everything.
Yeah, that's right. It's you can bring sherry in to fill back into them and stuff, but you need to bring it in a authorized vessel, a sort of tanker, where there's no evaporation and all the rest of it. So
has the, I mean, I don't want to interrupt like right at the beginning, but I am. But has the Ballantine's profile changed because of that sherry bourbon ratio? What is the ratio, in fact, in Ballantine's?
Ballantine's is almost entirely American oak, especially at the lower end. Finest 12 barrel smooth. It's only when you start getting up to the 21-year-old, you start getting a little bit more of the European oak influence coming in. But the style of Ballantine's is very much about the four corners of Scotland. I know we're not here to talk about Ballantine's, but it started as a grocery shop in Edinburgh. And being in Edinburgh, the capital city, George Ballantyne had great access to distilleries all over Scotland. So he was bringing whiskey in from Lowlands, Highlands, Speyside, Islay. And that's why the Ballantine's blend does tend to be incredibly well balanced, and you're getting influence from each of those regions. But with the Glenburghie, with the single malt, you'll get all sorts of things going on, especially when you go to the independent bottlers and things like that. So looking forward to that. But what's amazing to me is that even from that bottled in 2002, so distilled in the 80s, is how similar that is to the 15-year-old which we produce today, which is in a different distillery really as well. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment too, a little bit of the history of the distillery. So as you go back to that, there's different things coming out. Give us some of your thoughts. I'm just going to pour a little bit of water into it as well, just to help bring out the more delicate notes.
I mean, this is my third bottle of this, so I obviously quite like it.
You do.
This one was actually free as well from Whiskey Santa, so we didn't even have to pay for it.
It was very easy drinking there as well at 46%. There wasn't any issue with nosing and tasting that at its 46% strength, and with that little dash of water in it, it's quite nice. It just brings out more of those delicate sort of fruity notes.
I mean, that's quite ahead of its time, isn't it, to bottle something at 46% in 2002? That's quite forward thinking, given now it seems to be the single malt norm.
Yeah, it would have been fairly rare for the time. I would think it wouldn't be too many. These days you'll get 46, 48%, and more these days natural strength, cask strength, which is great to see. Great to try them at natural strength. But Unfortunately, we don't have a natural strength Glenburgie at the moment. Every so often we will bring out a distillery reserve for Glenburgie, usually a single cask, and that will be at natural strength, but we don't have one currently. I'll talk more about those towards the end as well. So how do you think that is, guys? Is this the first Glenburgie? Anyone's first Glenburgie here? Ben, good stuff. How do you enjoy that?
Yeah, I really like that. That's I like the sweetness of it, the mouthfeel as well. It's got a nice sort of amount of body to it. A little bit of prickle on the tongue afterwards as well. A little bit of sort of like that white peppery prickle, but the sweetness. That's I could sit that all evening, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's very sippable, isn't it? And it's very typical Speyside. That sweet fruitiness that's coming through, and it suits my palate as well. I've got a sweet tooth, so I love all those sweet, fruity drams. So just as well I work for Chivas Brothers, and most of our distilleries are in Speyside, apart from one, which is Scapa in the Highlands up in Orkney, and it's not even a typical Highland. It's quite fruity as well. So yeah.
Sorry, forgive me for joining late. Is that this one with the sort of blue label?
No, that's the current one that we bottle today. Will's got it there. It's the previous bottling. So that would have been bottled by our predecessor, the last owner of the distillery, which was Allied Domecq or Allied Distillers. They owned the Ballantyne's brand. They owned the Glenburghie distillery and the other distilleries in the portfolio up until 2005 was when Chivas Brothers Pernod Ricard took over Allied Domecq's portfolio as well. So that would have been, that bottling probably stopped around, I don't know that they would have produced any more of those anytime after 2004. And we only brought it out again as a single malt 15-year-old, it's about 4 years ago now, so about 2017, somewhere around that. And we now have it in an 18 and a 15. I think there's talk of a 21 as well, even so. Anyone else? And if there's any other questions on this one, I'll take them just now. If not, what we'll do is you can sip away on that and I'll give you a little bit of history of the distillery, if you like.
I'm really getting that blackcurrant note that you talked about at the start. Don't know if that's auto-suggested on your behalf, but it really is quite dominant there. It's quite prominent and dominant there.
No, it's funny how when someone says something, you go, oh, yeah, I do. But it is, it's a distillery.
Pickled onions. Pickled onions.
Pickled onions. No, don't get them.
He always says pickled onions, and then you can't get the out of your mind.
Right.
No, I'm sorry, Alex. No.
Okay. Well, the distillery at Glenburghie has a long history of distillation, which goes back to its pre-legal years, even before, in fact, whiskey production in the Speyside region would have been legalized. So legally, the distillery started production in 1829, but there is records going back to 1810 suggesting that whiskey was produced on the site. It was a farm. It wasn't called Glenburghie. At that point, it was Kinflat Farm, Kilnflat, Kilnflat Farm. So there's evidence to show that the farm owners, which wasn't unheard of at the time for the local farmers to be producing their own spirit illicitly, of course, because it wasn't until 1823 when spirit production in that part of Scotland became legalised in the Highlands. The Highland line was in a very different place back then, so it kind of ran not too far from here. So you're really far up in Scotland when you were into the Highlands. So pretty much most of Speyside would have been, a little bit of Speyside would have been classed as lowlands, but most of it in Highlands, and therefore 1823 before you could legally produce whiskey. But records, as I say, going back to 1810. The picture behind me of the Customs House, that is the oldest building still standing on the site, and that building dates back to 1810 to the farm. So Kilnflat Distillery officially got its license into production in 1829. And it was a little bit later on, 1878, where a guy called Charles Kay took over at the distillery, and he renamed it Glenburghie Distillery after a nearby barracks, Burghie Castle. In fact, it's just behind the distillery where we have Burghie Moor, and that apparently is, if you know Shakespeare, that's where Macbeth met the three witches, or the three witches appeared to Macbeth at Burghie Moor. So Allied Distillers rebuilt the distillery in 2004. It cost them 4.3 million. And the old distillery, which would have been positioned where the cameraman would have been when he was taking that picture of the house behind me. So the original distillery would have been on the lawn in front of that house. The last spirit flowed from that old distillery on the 23rd of June, 2004. And on the 24th of October, the first spirit run from the new distillery flowed. And then, of course, the very next year, the distillery became part of the Pernod Ricard Group. And it's been part of our portfolio ever since. Did I hear we had somebody from Ireland with us tonight? Stephen, is it you? Somebody from Dublin?
It is Stephen.
It is Stephen. Yeah, well, I don't know, Stephen, if you know the connection between Glenburghie Distillery, in fact, the house behind me, and Ireland.
I don't. I'd love to hear it though.
I bet you would. So the house behind me is the Customs House, and that is where the customs officer lived and worked, and the casks kept down in the basement. So no one was getting in for a fly dram without the customs officer knowing about it. Well, the customs officer was actually an Irishman. And because, of course, back in the 1800s, it was all part of Great Britain. And there was a gentleman called Maurice Walsh. I don't know if you've heard of him. And he was an excise man for what would have been His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Worked for a while in Ireland, then got a posting to Scotland and spent much of his time in the Highlands of Scotland. That's where he met his wife. She was from Dufftown, which is another big distilling mecca in the area. They had, I think it was 3 boys, 2 girls. And the girls died quite young. And one of his grandchildren, actually, I think, was a Irish prime minister or president, something like that. Can't remember exactly. But what he was famous for was he wrote the story The Quiet Man, which got made into a film with John Wayne. So if ever you see, it's usually on a bank holiday or something like that, when there's not much else on the television. If ever you see the film The Quiet Man, which is a romance story set in the Isle of Innisfree in Ireland, it was written by Maurice Walsh, who was the excise man at Glenburghie Distillery, and that's the very house he would have lived in behind me.
The Quiet Man's the film with the tremendous fight scene, isn't it? That rolls along the town square and down the village. A good 5-10 minute fight scene with John Wayne. I remember from watching it when I was a child.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I think you might be right. Actually, yeah. What I remember about it was a couple going courting, but they weren't allowed on their own. Somebody had to chaperone them and sit in the horse and cart with them, in case I think it was called, there was any petty fingers, was the line at the time. So there you go, different times. So
And
there you go, Steve.
Did they name the whiskey A Quiet Man after that movie? Or I think there's some reference, or I think they reference it sometime. I'm not sure.
I'm not aware of any bottlings that we've done about that, but there could be other ones, because
there's an Irish whiskey brand called The Quiet Man.
Oh, there's an Irish. So yeah, we go.
I presume it's linked to the film.
It probably is, and it could be referring to the fact that he was an excise man, and he did go back, and he worked in Ireland for a good while after that, before he retired as an excise man there as well. And then when Ireland became an independent state, it changed from HMRC to the whatever the name is in Gaelic for the Irish Customs and Excise, and he took up a position there as well. So he was working in Ireland as a customs officer long after. So maybe that Quiet Man is a reference to the whiskey or the distillery that he worked in Ireland.
Could well be.
Could well be. It wasn't just Glenburghie he worked at, by the way, in Scotland. There was a few. I think the customs officers tended to get moved about in case they got too familiar with a distillery manager and there was any sort of backhanders or arrangements going on. So they didn't stay in the one place too long.
Probably smart in Ireland.
There you go. So that's a little bit of the history of Glenburghie. Today it's a very modern distillery. The reason, of course, they demolished the old one and built a new one on the site is because they were expanding the capacity of the distillery, and the old distillery wasn't in great shape. Allied distillers didn't have a great reputation for investing in their sites or even upkeep. We took over distilleries that didn't have a roof. It took us quite a while of getting the estate back up to where it should be. And so they wanted to increase capacity. The old distillery wasn't in great shape, so it was just more efficient to build a new building. Much of the equipment, however, did come with them. You'll see after we do another tasting, I'll show you inside the distillery. I'll have a little video tour. You'll see the mill, the Porteous Mill from the old distillery. 4 of the stills came from the old distillery, and the mash tun came through from the old distillery as well. So a lot of it still with the old equipment. That's probably as well why we'll see, those same flavours coming through in this that I would expect to see coming through in a Glenburghie today. That blackcurrant flavour still there. So the engineering team who done the upgrade certainly done a very good job, and that's what's really important to us, is that consistency of flavour. It's still the Glenburghie that the blenders would have known at the time and would have relied on for blending into Valentine's, because that's where most of it goes. It's very rare to get a single malt Glenburghie. Okay, so I think we're on to Old Particular next, Will, isn't it? I'm just going to, 51.5%.
Oh, it's the stinky one.
Yeah.
Could ruin your palate, this one.
Oh dear. Should we be leaving this to the end? I really
That's a
should have
cask.
tried these before.
I might not try this till the end. I might smell it.
Do you want to move this one to the end?
Well, I don't know. I'm just
let's
saying.
go.
that
Yeah,
it's one of
let's.
those-
Yeah.
Well,
I
it's
think
one
it
of
It
those.
is one of those.
What to do is, if there's a better one, like the first one, keep some of that. Don't drink all of that. And what you can do is you can compare them all to that. And if the old particular isn't that particular, at the end we can finish on another one that's maybe a little bit more palatable. So let's go to Gordon McPhail's Connoisseur Choice at 55.3.
Good idea.
Oh. Uh, 20-year-old says on this one, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, quite light in colour for a 20-year-old. Nice colour though. Cask strength, 55.3. There's a sort of candy. It's like what do you call it? It's the pears, the hard pear sweets.
Pear drops.
Pear drops. Anybody else with pear drops?
Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of lemon there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, citrus. Gonna have a sip. Nice. Even at 55.5%. Not too prickly. Nice freshness to it. Smooth, sweet. That sort of lemon sherbety kind of tickle on the tongue there. That pear drop flavour hanging around as well.
So Tristan, can I ask about the fruitiness
Yeah.
of Glenburghie? Because it's got to be in the spirit, hasn't it? Because the cask management's changed, the sherry casks have kind of gone, but we've still got all of that fruitiness.
Yeah, it is in the spirit. It's in the new make spirit. That's where you get that. That's where that blackcurrant note comes through. Right. A bit of there's a bit of vanilla going on there as well. So probably safe to say, I don't know if it tells you on the bottle, but I would think that's all American oak cask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Refill.
Yeah.
A
so
little
yeah,
bit of water. Sorry, Tristan. A little bit of water brings out some heather honey on the nose, actually.
Well, I'm just going to do that just now and see what we think. A little bit of water. I've got a more. I see some of you with pipettes there. I've got a more coarse way of doing it. Just tip it in.
Mm-hmm. Sticky, waxy mouthfeel.
Ooh.
Amazing.
That's got more spice to it now. Even in the nose as well. A bit more spice coming through. The pears are still there, those lovely orchard fruits. A little bit of tropical fruit maybe as well. Gordon McPhail do quite a lot of cask fills of our distilleries. I think they had we've got the Glenlivet, and I think they've, it was a few years ago now, released the oldest ever bottling of a Glenlivet. It was a 70-year-old they released. So they have a lot of stocks of a lot of Speyside whiskies, but of ours as well. So we'll do a lot of fillings for them. This, coincidentally, Gordon and McPhail are in Elgin, and the distillery at Glenburghie is only about 5-6 miles outside Elgin as you're heading towards Inverness going west. So this spirit will have travelled the least to get to its aging location, its cask filling site in Elgin. So it's probably spent most of its time closest to the distillery, closer than maybe any of the other ones. And I would include the distillery bottling in that, because there are warehouses on site, but there's no guarantee that what's in that bottle all came from the on-site warehouses. Much of that may have came from Allied's warehouses, which would have been down in Dumbuck and Willow Yard, which are both near Glasgow.
What did you say the cask type was for this one?
American oak. Well,
American
that's what I'm assuming, but I don't know if the detail is in the bottle. But yeah,
it is for sure.
Yeah,
It's
refill.
And also, Will, this is a single cask, right? Or is it
Yep.
more of a small batch?
I think it is a
thought
single
was
cask.
Single cask.
Yeah.
Yeah, 200.
It's interesting that they're all single
45
casks,
bottles.
these.
Yeah,
Yeah.
200 and odd bottles, was it?
yeah,
240.
245, I think it says.
Okay, so 20 years. You're probably looking at, it's not a barrel, then it'll be a hogshead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely get a bit more spice on this, don't you? I agree with you. A bit of water really opens the spice up a bit. I get a bit of dark, bitter chocolate as well. And just on the back end, just a little bit of cashew nut as well, which is, I think I prefer this one to the previous one, actually.
Drying finish, quite a lot of wood influence in there as well. Like it's got slightly astringent kind of bite at the end.
Gordon and MacPhail, I always find do them justice. I think their cask quality is pretty good. And I've never had a bad Gordon and MacPhail yet, actually.
Do distillers have a veto on the type of casks that independent bottlers? No. You sell it, and that's it.
Yeah, we'll sell it to them as new make spirit, and it's totally up to them. What they put it in. We obviously have our partners that we'll work with, but we don't have any control what casks they put it into.
Surely it's in your own interest and the reputation of the distillery to choose independent bottlers who have a reputation of looking after the new make and putting it in fine casks in order to bring out the best in the spirit.
Yeah, we do, but you can never guarantee that. And you can never guarantee it with your own whiskey as well, that you get a rogue cask every now and again or something like that. So that's why on the label or on the bottle, it always has to be super clear that it's not a distillery bottling, it's a Gordon and MacPhail or a Douglas Lang or whatever, Glenburghie. So once it leaves us as new make spirit, it's out of our hands. We don't have any control really over that aging process, how long they age it for, what wood it goes into. But we're happy enough as long as the label is not suggesting that it's a distillery bottling and that it's quite clear it's coming from an independent bottler.
Right, thanks, John.
So when you would actually sell to an independent bottler, would you just send an IBC to them and they put it in their own casks? So you never actually get to see what cask they put it. Obviously, they don't send their own casks to you. You just send it in an IBC and then they take it to their bonded warehouse.
Yeah, that's right. It'll go straight to their filling facility. So it won't come anywhere near us at all. Yeah. So sip away and enjoy that. And we'll take a little look at some of the production stats for the distillery. And then I'll show you a quick video that I made. Don't get too excited. It's not super duper slick marketing video. It was done by me on my mobile phone through lockdown to allow me to train some duty-free staff on Ballantynes and Glenburghie. So it's a little bit hand knitted, but it lets you see inside. But before we do, we'll just take a look at some of the statistics for the distillery. Every week, we will bring in to Glenburghie 225 tonnes of malted barley. And our supplier for barley is Baird's Malt. Most of that coming from the local area. This part of Scotland, Speyside, is, many of you have probably been, but it's great for growing barley. It does tend to be, I used to live in Glasgow, but moved up quite recently, and it is a lot drier up here. It gets a bit more sunshine and stuff. So good for growing barley. And as much as possible, we bring in the local stuff. Spring water, we're using at the distillery, and as well, since the extension, the spring has not been, quite enough to supply all the water required. So we also have a borehole on site that we use for bringing additional water up through the ground. Liquid yeast is also the other material. Porteous Mill, we're putting through a grind of 7.5 tonnes, and it will take that Porteous Mill 2 hours and 15 minutes to get through that 7.5 tonne grind. From that, the 7.5 tonnes of grist is going into our mash tun, and the mash cycle at Glenburghie is 5 hours. So that's quite long. If we compared that to, so 7.5 tonnes over 5 hours, it's a more traditional kind of mash tun. If we had a Briggs full outer mash tun like the one at Glenlivet, that is mashing 15 tonnes in 3 hours and 15 minutes. So you can see the difference in the equipment there right away. 30 mashes a week we'll get through at Glenburghie. For the fermentation, it's stainless steel washbacks these days at Glenburghie Distillery, and each of those stainless steel washbacks will be filled with 34,500 litres of worts, and that's been filled in at 17 degrees Celsius. Don't want it any warmer than that, otherwise, it's just going to kill the yeast if it gets in too warm. Fermentation time at Glenburghie, 56 hours is the standard, but you'll also get some fermentations running over to 60 hours. It's just a little anomaly with some of the cleaning cycles at the distillery that a couple will be delayed. So most going through at 56. There's a few going through that are let run to 60-hour fermentation. 6 stills, 3 pairs of stills, so 3 wash stills, 3 spirit stills, and together all of those stills are producing the capacity at the distillery, which is just over 4 million litres. It's 4.25 million litres of new make spirit every year going through for maturation. Now, those stills are a little bit different. You'll see in the video that the spirit stills are slightly bigger than the wash stills, which is a bit of an anomaly as well. Your wash charge, so the amount of wash you're charging out of the wash still, is 11,400 litres. But going into the spirit still, we're charging that with 13,700 litres. So we're charging the spirit still with more than we're charging the wash still. And how that works is we'll run the wash still twice to every one cycle of the spirit still. Your wash still will run for 5 hours. So we'll run that twice, 5 hours, discharge, recharge, run it again for 5 hours. That gives us 10 hours, which we can play with to run the spirit still. So we've got that bigger charge, but we're running it slow over 10 hours. And because it's a nice slow, we're not, you're not boiling the, as they say in Scotland, not boiling the arse off it. It's nice and slow. We can bring the temperature up nice and gently, give it a nice slow distillation. That gives you more copper contact in there. The vapors are going to be hanging about in the still longer before they go up the neck and into the lye pipe. So with that longer, slower distillation, more copper contact, stripping out more impurities, and that's what gives us that very, very smooth, beautiful, smooth, sweet, fruity spirit. And that's, there's a few distilleries have that. Aberlour's another one, but not many distilleries will be running 2 wash to 1 spirit. So some distilleries will do other things, like you maybe have a purifier on your still or something like that drops it back from the condenser into the still. But best way to do it is a nice slow distillation, 10 hours.
Has that changed a bit, Tristan? Because I was watching a video. I'm trying to think now, with the distillery manager Neil Corbett. And he was saying at the time, and this is quite a while ago, he was saying it was three times wash still, 2 spirit still. But in a way, he was explaining exactly the same thing, 5, 5, and 10.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. I wondered what was going on there. It sounds like what Annandale do. That's the only other distillery I can think of off the top of my head where they do 2.
There's a few, but not too many. It can change. So how long ago was that video with Neil?
I think it was probably 10 years ago or something, 9, 10 years. So it's a bit of a while ago. Yeah,
it's been 2 to 1 for a wee while now.
Okay,
so
I'll change that. Yeah.
They've obviously found that that's a more efficient way of running it or whatever. So it gets the result a little bit better. So.
Do you think there's, and I don't mean to sound this derogatory at all, I mean, there's a sulphur quality in the spirit. Do you find that? Not in a negative way, a bit of a kind of that Craigellachie kind of
Craigellachie
sulphur element. Not from the cask, but a floral quality.
Floral quality. Yeah, I suppose it depends how you describe your flavour, doesn't it? I wish I wish I'd got myself a new make sample so that I could. It's been a wee while since I've. Yeah.
Damn.
And we could really have. Yeah, it's very hard for me to say without a new make sample here where that sulphuryness has come from. You've picked it up already tonight.
Yeah.
Is it coming from the sherry cask in that first one?
I think it's coming from this one, this refill bourbon. I think it's coming from the spirit, and I like it a lot. It's got that Craigellachie kind of possibly liquid vibe. Inchgower, Manatmore.
It's very pleasant anyway.
Very nice.
Yeah. Possibly. We're getting a little bit of sulphur coming through, but I'm going to have to. When I'm off next week, I'm on holiday. I'll tell you, the week after, I'll be over to KB2 for a sensory sample of the new make to check that out.
Excellent. Feel free to send us a bottle.
Yeah. So, all a nice. What's the strength? What are we distilling up to?
69, is it?
I think it might be 60. It's where we're taking us, where we start. Take us at 71 to 71 to 66 or something around that. Anyway, I'll share the video with you now, and you can sip in your dram and watch the video. you all see that okay?
Yep.
All good.
Hello, my name's Tristan Campbell, International Brand Ambassador with Chivas Brothers, and welcome to Glenburghie Distillery, home of Ballantine's. Glenburghie dates back to 1829, and today is one of 3 distilleries in Speyside which make up the heart of the Ballantine's blend, the 3 being Glenburghie, where we're at today, Milton Duff and Glentochers. Why not join me inside for a look around and see how we make Glenburghie single malt. It all starts with the finest quality natural ingredients, and of course we have our water, our yeast and our malted barley. The barley being malted by the maltsters before it arrives at the distillery, and when it comes in, resting for around a week before we are ready to use it in the mill. In the mill house, we are bringing our malted barley into the mill to grind it into a grist. This just allows us to access those starches and sugars within the malted barley, and it's these sugars that we will convert to alcohol later in the process. This old Porteous Patent Mill is around 60 years old and was manufactured at the Porteous site in Leeds, a very reliable piece of machinery indeed, and still going strong to this day. 7.5 tonnes of grist going into the mash tun over a 5-hour period, extracting all of those sugars to give us our sweet, sugary wort. Our sweet sugary liquid called worts is then coming into one of 12 stainless steel washbacks at Glenburghie, where it will undergo fermentation over 56 hours, giving us that sweet beer we call wash. From here, our wash will head across into one of our wash stills in the still house. The still house at Glenburghie with 6 stills, 3 wash stills and 3 spirit stills. The wash going into the wash stills first, taking it up to 25% ABV, now known as the low wines. The low wines then taken across to the spirit stills for further distillation up to high strength, 65 or 70% ABV. The stills here operating slightly differently to elsewhere, with 2 charges of a wash still to 1 charge of a spirit still, giving the wash stills a run of 5 hours and the spirit stills a run of 10 hours, meaning a very slow second distillation. That slow distillation meaning more copper contact and a very pure spirit. You'll notice the new make spirit coming off the still is clear as water, and that is because the colour comes from time spent in the cask. Here in the warehouse, we see the casks aging for many years. Depending on the product will depend how long they're spending in the casks. These American oak casks lending us colours light golden and flavours of sweet vanilla, flavours and colours synonymous with Ballantine's. And while it's aging, it's evaporating. 2% we lose every year to evaporation, called the Angel's Share. Well, I hope you enjoyed our tour of Glenburghie. I thought I would say a few words about the Ballantine's range of whiskies. It's a range of blended whiskies from our finest, barrel smooth, 12-year-old, goes right the way up 17, 21, 30, and the very exclusive 40-year-old, of which there are only 100 bottles produced every year. This family style for the Ballantine's blend is a style of incredible balance, a great balance of whiskies from every region of Scotland. In fact, we talk about from the 4 corners of Scotland to the 4 corners of the world. We've got whiskies from the Lowlands, Highlands, Speyside and Islay, bringing together those wonderful light flavours from the lowlands, the spicy notes from Highland, the fruitiness of Speyside, and a little hint of that smokiness from Islay, giving us that incredible balance. I hope that you'll take the time to explore the range and enjoy a Valentine's yourself sometime soon, and I hope you enjoy it responsibly. Until the next time, I wish you well. Slanjaba. Well, there you go. Apologies for the step-by-step guide. I know you guys will know the process very well indeed, but it was aimed at duty-free staff who 1 minute are selling perfumes and chocolate and the next minute are selling whiskey. But it gives you a little view inside the distillery. As you can see, much more modern than the previous distillery would have been. And it's quite a nice distillery to be in, because if you're standing in the middle, you can see the whole thing. You can be standing beside the mash tun, and you can see fermentation, and you can see the stills, and it sort of brings everything together. So any questions about the distillery and the process there? Probably a good point to take them just now, and then we'll have another whiskey.
Oh, I want to ask something, but I'm not quite sure what the question is yet. But I mean, I guess I was just looking at it all today. I was reading 80 million bottles of Ballantine's sold every year. That was in 2018. It's an absolute workhorse distillery. It's all for blend, and I'm just wondering. I don't really know what the question is, but it's something about why on earth would Glenburghie worry about single malt production for single malt enthusiasts? Not that they need to. And I guess the only room, because you wouldn't mess with the recipe in the distillery, so the only way you could do anything there is by playing around with casks, which is what everyone else has done. I don't really know that there's a question in there, Tristan, that you need to say anything, but I'm just kind of playing it through in my mind what I'd do if I owned a huge distillery. In fact, 13 distilleries owned by Pernod, and Glenburghie is the absolute heart of it all, you know.
Well, it's the heart of, it's one of three, which is the heart of Ballantine's. In fact, there is a fourth, which is Scapa, but that doesn't really come into play until you get to 17-year-old Ballantine's. Ballantine's, second largest whiskey brand, Scotch whiskey brand in the world after Johnnie Walker. It's the largest whiskey brand in Europe, even though up until a few years ago you couldn't even get it in the UK. Now you can get Finest in the supermarket, and some of the aged range in more specialist shops. The thing is, although we've got 13 distilleries, there's actually 40 malt whiskies make up the Ballantine's blend. So there's a lot more whiskey goes into it than just Glenburghie. Volumes on Glenburghie at the moment, it's about 8.5 million 9-litre cases is how we count it. So yeah, lots of spirit. Why would we worry about single malt? Well, I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys, but many people, particularly in clubs, who gather and nose, taste, appreciate fine single malt whiskies. Many people like this have a dim view of blends, and there's some people out there that will say, "Oh, I only drink single malt whiskey. I wouldn't entertain a blend." And to me, that's a real shame, because they're missing out on so much. So by bringing out the single malts of Ballantine's, we've released the Glenburghie, the Glentochers, the Milton Duff. It's our way of saying, look, try the components. Here's what's going into your blend. It's fantastic, great quality single malt whiskies. And just imagine the flavors and the complexity you can enjoy in your blend if you're bringing in single malts of this quality to bring it together. So that's really what we're seeing, and allowing people who do drink the Ballantine's blend as well to discover some of the components in their most sort of raw form.
I've got a quick question coming from that. Of everybody here, who hasn't actually tried Ballantine's? Will? Any more?
I think Ben had just had one before, I think.
So probably most people have actually tried the Ballantine's brand in itself. I'm just wondering what people's relation to the Ballantine's as a blended whiskey in the blended whiskey market is like. I've only ever tried it once a long time ago. Obviously your Johnny Walkers and things like that I've tried. But Ballantine's, it's not really something that we see an awful lot, I don't think.
That was a question I was going to ask as well, Wayne. Obviously, Tristan, you've been there 13 going on 14 years. How has the market for Ballantine's whiskey changed in terms of emerging markets in the Far East and India and in North America? Have you seen a change in drinking habits in terms of Ballantine's and where you've been selling it over the last decade or so since you've been there?
Yeah, so when I started, the biggest market for Ballantine's was Spain. Still is a very big market for Ballantine's, but then, you had the financial crisis, things haven't been so good in Spain, and we've been seeing a drop off in popularity there. We've been seeing popularity really pick up, unbelievably so, in Poland, where you would think they all just drink vodka, but they can't get enough Scotch whiskey either. And we're seeing volumes of Ballantine's skyrocket there. It's very popular in Korea. We used to hold a golf competition in Korea as well, South Korea. It's not so popular in North America, and that's where we kind of lose the footing a bit. It's the most popular Scotch whiskey in Europe, but because it's almost like the UK, USA. It's very hard to get it. You can't get it. In fact, our distribution company, which is Pernod Ricard USA, don't even distribute it in USA. It goes through a third-party distributor called Sazerac, who distribute it there. But it does very well in South American countries, Brazil, Mexico, places like that. So it's funny, and different brands sort of have different strengths. So the Chivas Regal brand, which is slightly more premium than the Ballantine's, but it's more prevalent in USA. It's very big in China. You get it more widespread in the UK, but doesn't do quite as well in Spain or Poland. The biggest market for Chivas Regal is duty free, which isn't so good at the minute. But yeah.
And is Ballantine's a brand then is backed with lots of advertising and marketing money then?
It probably could be backed with a lot more, but it is a brand which is very well recognized and does quite well itself. There's a lot of marketing goes into the lower end of Ballantine's, your finest, where that's aimed at young men sort of between 24 and 35, and the sort of party lifestyle, collaborations with DJs, things like that, things that you might not associate with Scotch whiskey. And it's all about Ballantine's finest and mixers, cocktails, as a way of converting that 20-year-old drinker from a Johnny Walker or from a Jack Daniels into a Scotch, And then we hope that once we've, got them in finest, that they'll maybe trade up to 12 and try it neat, and then investigate it a little bit further and go for the, the really good stuff, the 17, the 21, the 30. So that's the plan, is recruit at finest and then bring them up through.
Thanks, Tristan. Thank you.
Yeah. Time for another dram?
I think so.
Nums.
Cadenheads 2010 at 56.6% is what I've got. I've just poured out of the glass, and already I'm loving it because I love the colour. It's got a nice deep colour to it, which appeals to me. We're all, it's like being in the restaurant, isn't it? And it's that food envy when you see them coming out with the dish for the table across the way. I wish I'd ordered that. That looks good.
The lovely banana esters on the nose there. It's absolutely lovely. And it's foam bananas.
Oh.
And some pears as well going on there.
That pear drop thing is back again, isn't it?
It's lovely.
Certainly is. Quite fresh.
Though.
A little bit more, slightly more prickly than the previous one. It is just a 10-year-old, I think, this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was the Cadenhead shop one, the one with the London shop on the outside of the label, well, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I would suggest, the pear drop thing is really prevalent on this one. It's like the distillery characters are more there, perhaps because it's a younger one. There's not the same sort of cask influence. I think maybe a bit of sherry cask influence here. In fact, the colour gives that away, doesn't it?
What's the ABV on this one, Will? It's this is quite high.
56.6.
56.6. Yeah.
6, yeah, okay.
So it's not much more than the last one, but it certainly
In
feels
fact,
it.
In fact,
It gives you a bit of a kick, doesn't it?
it does. In fact, I think that's total sherry cask. There's no American oak there at all.
Yeah, it doesn't list the originals. It's finished in a Palo Cortado cask, but only for a year. So
Wayne, you're really good at commenting on where the spirit.
Front of the mouth, right beyond the lips. It's tingling right beyond the lips on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's that high ABV has got it right at the front of the mouth for me, and the pear drops definitely get a lot of pear on here.
Yeah, definitely. I'm loving this one. I'm going to just add a little splash of water though.
It really helps the mouthfeel, I think, water. Is anyone getting a saltiness, or is that coming from another one? Might be
No, there is a little bit of brine on the finish, I find.
Just not a lot, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, but it's I find it on the finish as it's going down, right at the back of the palate.
It's interesting. The nose has developed into an almost sort of bourbon-esque nose. Ben, you being the bourbon guy, and Will as well. Sort of slight bourbon nose to it, a wee bit acetone.
This is the only one that I tried before tonight, deliberately. Yeah, the first one I'd had a few bottles of, but this one I did cheat. So
there's a real sweet finish to it as well. A nice long finish, but quite sweet.
I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's so SMWS, isn't it? I can't think how many times I've had this at the SMWS, but from so many other distilleries. I mean, nothing to do.
We're not on the Cadenheads. We're not on the SMWS.
Cadenheads.
Cadenheads.
I've mixed them up then. I'm on the SMWS.
Get the other one opened. Keep that one back. It's next.
This is all so confusing because it was my fault. I got rid of the sherried one, and now I'm all for the sea.
And then, I mean, this one was it £50, 55 a bottle?
Yeah, I think so. I've got a bottle of it. Yeah,
it's quite good.
It's a metamorphosis dram. It's changing quite a bit actually on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
Maidenheads, yeah. Oh, this is the Paolo Cortado finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, it was so sweet half an hour ago.
It's beautiful. So this really appeals to my palate. That sweet. I love a sherry cask whiskey, a sherry cask finish, or a full maturation. So they just, that's what I could drink the whole time, really.
I'm getting some kind of like almost like hot chocolate from this, and a little bit of ginger in it as well for me.
Mm-hmm. Bit of cinnamon, maybe.
Yeah. It's so waxy in all of these. I'm getting this kind of climb leash.
Yeah, I've had a couple of drops of water, and I think that really has opened it out a bit. I think that's where the flavour's coming for me now.
Yeah.
On the nose, I'm getting some sort of hot crumpets and maple syrup, but I'm not going to add some water to see if it changes anything.
I love these tasting notes.
Crumpets
and maple syrup.
I suppose the Glaswegian crumpets are crumpets you probably call pancakes down where you are, Wayne.
No, pikelets when I was a kid, we used to call them.
There's waxy crayons there. I remember Crayola crayons that you used to have as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
On the nose, a wee bit of water opens that up. You sort of, that probably ties in with the waxiness Alex was talking about.
Plasticine. Good one.
Petrichor, is it as well?
I think this is my favourite so far of the night.
If Fee was here, she would probably say Plimsolls on the nose with a little bit of water. You know, your gym shoes you used to wear in primary school.
It's like Ben's comments last night. Everything was rubber.
See, I get none of that off this at all tonight. None of it. None of that sort of like. I mean, I know we've talked about sulphur a couple of times, but I don't get that from these. I don't know. Maybe I'm broken, but
yeah, because it's not coming from the cask. You wait till the last one.
Yeah, I did have a quick sniff of that last one, and I think that's a bit of a shocker. On the
last one being the second one, it's now last. The last one being SMWS.
No, the last one being the second one that has now gone to last.
The old particular. But I'm actually quite looking forward to that. I
think it's going to be very different.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting because water still sort of water brings out the sort of distillery, the spirit sort of lemoniness, the fruitiness that's always been sort of common thread running through the 2 or 3 that we've had already.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. The common thread throughout 1, 2, and 3 now.
It's a sort of it's the spirit's DNA in many ways that's coming through.
you said that you do distillery releases on occasion.
Yeah, we do. Part of the distillery reserve collection, which is strange that Glenburghie's in it, and because it's usually just whiskies which have a visitor centre, or as we call it, a brand home. So Strathyla, Scapa, Aberlour, Glenlivet. And the distillery reserve collection is bottled in small half-litre bottles, all cask strength, non-chill filtered, no colouring. So, you know, as close as you can get to a dram from the cask. And they are only sold at the distillery shop. So it's a way of getting people to, you know, visit the distillery if you want one of these exclusive bottles, you know, to try the Glenlivet or the Aberlour as close to cask strength as you can. But every now and again we do Glenburghie. We've got a Longmorn out at the minute, and we've got a Breval out at the minute. So Breval, again, it's another one of these distilleries. All goes for blending. It's the highest distillery in Scotland. even higher than the distillery that says it's the highest distillery in Scotland, at 1,655 feet above sea level. And so Longmorn is another one which is used mainly for blending, but you talk about Longmorn being top dressing for a blend, but it does have its own single malt brand as well, so you can get a Longmorn in a standard bottling.
I had no idea that you could visit Glenburghie Distillery.
You can't. And that is why it's strange that we did have in the past some cask strength distillery reserves. I'm sure we'll have them again in the future. It's just this year that there isn't one. No. And it's funny because there was talk of opening a visitor centre there just before COVID-19, and I think that's just kicked any plans into the long grass. The reason they were talking about it was because it is a bigger brand than Chivas Regal, but Chivas Regal has a brand home at Strathyla, oldest operating distillery in the Highlands. And Glenburghie, which is a far bigger brand, double the volumes, doesn't have a brand home, doesn't have a distillery that people can go to visit. We do have a facility there. That house behind me is no longer the customs officer's abode. There's no customs officer there anymore. It's now a tasting room. So I will take trade visitors, mainly folk that own duty-free shops, hoteliers, restaurateurs, people who buy, pallet loads of the stuff, who'll come to visit Scotland, and I'll take them around the distillery. So the only other time that we open it to public would be Spirit of Speyside Whisky Festival, when we'll do special events at distilleries that are normally close to the public. We'll open up Longmorn, we'll open up Glentochers, we'll open Glenburghie, Milton Duff, even Brave Isle. I've done tours there called Off the Beaten Track, and people can't believe how removed from civilization it is. It takes an email a week to get up to Brave Isle. So
you mentioned Scapa earlier, Tristan, and I always feel sorry for Scapa. It must be really, really difficult to sort of live in Highland Park's shadow and sort of try and achieve some sort of profile for it in Orkney.
Well, not at all. In Orkney, if you ask any Orcadian who doesn't work for Highland Park what their favourite drama is, they'll say Scapa. It benefits from that because usually when the tourists arrive or whatever and they ask a local, which distillery should I go to, they'll usually get pointed to Scapa. We don't have that big a visitor centre at Scapa. We can't have many people around it. It's a very small distillery, 2 stills. The Wash still is the only Lowman still in Scotland that's making whiskey, and the other one's making gin. It also has a purifier on it. So it was 1 million litres per year. It just went up to 1.2 million litres per year last year because we installed some new washbacks and went from 5-day to 7-day operation. Very, very long fermentation, 96 hours standard. You'll get up to 156 hours fermentation at Scapa in some cases. And a mix of cordite steel, stainless steel, and wooden washbacks. So if you want to know, is there a difference between your whiskey if it's fermented in wood or stainless steel, that's the place to go and see for yourself.
But I probably would agree with you in terms of Highland Park. I'm not necessarily a fan of Highland Park's own bottlings, but they're independent bottlings, particularly SMWS every month. They're releasing the last 6-7 months. SMWS have released a Highland Park outturn, and it's been absolutely fantastic. It's been really, really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a nice distillery. I quite like a Highland Park. I do prefer Scapa though. Most of the spirit produced at Scapa is going for blending again. So there's not a lot of, you can get the single malt, Skirin or Glansa. There was a 16-year-old. There's not a 16-year-old now because you're probably aware there was a gap in production. The distillery was closed down. When it reopened, it was only ran for 8 weeks, and it was the stillmen at Highland Park that were paid to come down and just run it for 8 weeks of the year, just to keep it ticking over a little bit. So it's now at a stage where I think we're getting close to getting the stocks back again to introduce an age statement back to that, and hopefully that's the 16 again that comes back, because that was a superb dram. But not a lot of marketing goes, in fact, zero marketing goes behind Scapa. A few people know it. Those that know it love it and they seek it out. And I think those that know it and seek it out and love it like the fact that it's not marketed or pushed or very well known. It's a kind of a niche. It's only those in the know kind of. But yeah, most of it's going for blending. Valentine's 17 is where you'll find it. Okay, well, we jump on to the Scotch Malt Whisky Society Yellow Brick Road. Strongest one yet, 60.7%.
How old's that, Will, the SMWS one?
10 years.
Yeah, given the strength, I didn't think it would be
Yeah.
quite light in colour as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely got a prickle on the nose.
We're definitely going to need a good splash of water in this one. I'll try it first.
So part of your group, is Plymouth Gin part of your group? Because I'm sure I've picked up the old Distillery Reserve bottlings down in Plymouth before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they'll have them in the bar there because it's a company bar. So yeah, they're phasing them out though. I think I was down not last Easter, but the Easter before. So 2 years ago was the last I was down at the Refectory Bar at Plymouth. And they said to me, yeah, the distillery reserves aren't a big seller there. Most people are in for the gin. And so they were saying, no, they're not going to be, once they're sold, they're sold. They're not going to replace them. But they're going to concentrate on the gin more. So, but you will have seen them there. It's amazing some of the consistencies in these, given that they're all from different bottlers, different cask types coming through as well. But here again is that pear drop note. Struggling to get the blackcurrant just now, but maybe when I put the water in, that's a more delicate note. So let's see.
I think what they all demonstrate so far, Tristan, is the consistency of the spirit, and the consistency of the smell, the taste, and the flavour of it. And I think like the common thread is what I mentioned earlier, is consistent across the four we've tried so far.
Yeah, and that's even when you think that when was this one bottled, Will?
This is fairly new. So this is definitely the new distillery.
New distillery.
Yeah.
So
2017.
27. So even when you go between this from the new distillery to the one from the distillery bottling in 2002, which would have been old distillery 1980s, yeah, there's a consistency even there, and that's amazing. Okay, it's a new building, but I think that just shows the job that the engineers have done in maintaining the distillery style. Well, a lot of the equipment remains the same. It's just laid out better. And I suppose the key is it has to be consistent for blending. And I can explain a little bit more about that procedure if you want to maintain that.
I was going to ask you, do you have a nose? Do you have a master blender who year on year chooses the proportion of the different whiskies that goes into your various blends?
Yeah, it's not year on year, it's week on week.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Every week, the blenders will come up to Speyside from Kilmalid, they go to our facility at Keith. They called Keith Bond 2, as we call it KB2. And on a Tuesday morning, there's a round table which spins. It's a lazy Susan, which they can move around, and they get all the distillery managers in at various points throughout the day. And they take a sample of every distillery, a sample of every batch produced from every distillery, and they line it up on that table against a sensory standard, so a control sample. And in that, there'll also be a hidden control sample. And this is the new make, and they're nosing it in blue cobalt glasses. They don't know what they're nosing. They just know the one at the front is the sensory sample. There's a hidden sensory standard in there as well. And they have to score them all from 1 to 5. 1 means it's on profile, 5 stars, 10 out of 10, tick the boxes, good to go. 1 means, what's went wrong there? That's not Glenburghie. What have you done? And so everything's scored against that. That score then goes on to our computer system called Spirit One. And when we look at our inventory of aged stock in our warehouse, not only can we see, oh, that's a first fill American oak barrel, and it's got Glenburghie in it, and the age of the youngest spirit is, we can tell the date of distillation. We can also tell the score, which from 1 to 5. So 1 totally off profile, 5 bang on profile. So because that's getting nosed every week by the master blenders against the control samples that we have, that keeps that consistency. If there's anything wrong, they will pick it up and they will go to the distillery. They will go with the manager and they'll say, right, what's happened different here this week than last week? What have you done differently? And quite often that can turn out to be something as simple as a cleaning routine. They were cleaning the mash tun, but something happened and they didn't quite get it finished in time, and they had to just put it all back together again and get moving, otherwise production would have been held up. So it didn't get a full clean. So you'll get a bit more cereally note coming through. Or something happened to one of the washbacks or something like that. So they will pinpoint what it is, and that can't happen again. Because for the blenders, it's not so much about the single malt. You could play different tunes with the distillery. You could say, let's go for a slightly different setup in the mash tun. Let's go for a slightly different yeast or slightly different fermentation. Let's try a different ratio of distilling. And that would be fine if you wanted to make a special bottling single malt for your distillery. It's absolutely no use whatsoever for blending though, because the blenders are wanting to produce a Ballantine's or a Chivas Regal or a Royal Salute, which is the same flavours consistently, because the customer wants that. They bought a bottle last year, last month, last week. They want the new bottle to be the same next week, next month, next year. And so the blenders require that consistency coming through with the new make spirit to allow them to produce consistent blends in 12, 17, 21, 30 or 40 years time. And that is why you've got that process. Every week, the new make spirit is nosed against the control samples.
I've got a quick question regarding that. Because this is something I've been looking at doing a tasting for us. We're going to call it Johnny Walker Through the Ages. We purchased some bottles from the kind of 50s, 60s, 80s, 90s, just to try that. Where do you think is that your tasters changed their formula for up and coming? Obviously, people's palates change over the eras. Mm-hmm. So who decides on when you're going to change your formula for the new up and coming kind of, I don't know, millennials or whatever that want a spicier or whatever? Yeah. Where does that come along in your kind of tasting panels?
Okay, so well, there's a couple of things. So you've had the Johnny Walker tasting through, and did you notice a big difference?
No, I've actually just collected all the bottles. We still need to sit down and kind of work out when we're going to do it. I mean, it's a fairly easy tasting because it's basically Johnny Walker Red, but in different
intervals.
Different intervals to see how it changes. I think it'll be quite interesting to see how that blend, because obviously you can't maintain that consistency over 70, 80, 90 years. Something's got to change because you get tasters are changing, and it might not be different in months or years, but over 10 years, 20 years, I think, you know.
Well, the recipe changes every year. And that's because different distilleries come online or come offline. And the challenge is, you know, if you got one that's going offline, so say, for example, Imperial Distillery would have been producing up to the late 1990s, was demolished, wasn't it? About 10 years ago now. And probably about 8 years ago now. And then they built a new distillery on the site called Dalmunach. So stocks of Imperial will be running out at particular age bands. So as that disappears, and that's one that's in Ballantynes, you need to replace that with something else. Sometimes that involves bringing together another 2 whiskies to create something that's similar to, you're making up like a little mini blend within a blend to come up to replace that recipe. So the recipe's changing every year. As for the tastes, if you go back to, any of the blends, we've got, lucky enough, you know, we've got an archive of our bottlings going way back. And we done an experiment with Chivas Regal. A couple of years ago, we brought an old 1982 bottle of Chivas Regal into the bar, and we let the customers try that against, a bottle from today. It was remarkably similar, not exactly the same. And the difference was, in the early 80s, you had what was called the Whiskey Lake. There was a lot of overproduction had went on previous to that, and there was a slump in demand for whiskey. So there was a Whiskey Lake, and what you were getting there in a blend in the early 80s was more malt and less grain. So they were dialing up the malt to wash it through, you know, to get rid of it. The warehouses were sitting full of it. Whereas as the 80s went on, it started to dial back down again. The Whiskey Lake was disappearing, and they got the balance a little bit better. So if you try a Walker's, I'm sure it's probably the same from the early 80s. You maybe find a wee bit more richness in it than one maybe from today. But what you should get is a consistency of flavour style. So Walker's, very similar history to Ballantynes and Chivas. They were all grocery shops. Johnny Walker's was in Kilmarnock. They were bringing in more spirit from Islay, so it's more smoky. And that's that style that comes through from, it just goes back to the history of where the shop was when the business started. Chivas Brothers shop was in Aberdeen. Most of the whiskies in Chivas is Speyside because it's in the doorstep to Aberdeen. Ballantynes, Edinburgh, Four Corners of Scotland. So it all goes back to the history and where it all started, and it's that flavour profile that continues. Now, to answer your point about, you know, how do we determine, you know, the new drinkers and new flavours? Well, how we answer that is, well, we keep the Chivas the same. We keep that Chivas 12 that's been there for, you know, since 1938, it was reformulated to a 12-year-old. Previous to that, it was a 25. It was the world's first luxury whiskey. Reformulated to a 12 in 1938, and up until 1997, that was it. You couldn't get anything else apart from the odd special edition, a 15-year-old or a century of malts or something like that. Until 1997, they introduced the 18. Now, if you look at Chivas, there's the 12, there's 3 13-year-olds, there's a 15-year-old, there's the 18, there's the 20, well, Altus is going to be a 20-year-old, there's the 25, and then there's the Icon. and then there's the duty-free versions as well. So it's a big family. And how we come up with the new flavors is they do customer profiling, and they'll go around the world to the biggest markets. They'll interview customers. They won't necessarily know they've been interviewed for, a particular brand, but they'll ask them questions about flavors. What flavors do you look for? They'll give them samples. Which sample do you like the best? And it's from those surveys that they'll determine what the new whiskies are, and they're bringing them out all the time. New cask finishes. So Chivas 12 should remain the same, because we don't want to alienate the customer that likes it and has drank it for many years. And yeah, if you go back and take one from 20 years ago, you maybe notice a little difference. But if you're drinking it consistently, you'll run with it and you'll not notice. So the new drinkers, yeah, we've got the 13-year-old, the sherry cask one. We've got a rye cask finish. We've got a rum cask finish, a tequila cask finish. XV, that's a finish off in cognac casks, Grand Champagne cognac casks. 18-year-old, heavily influenced there by sherry cask. So all these different flavors are coming out at different times, and they usually hang about unless they're really not popular, because particular people cling on to whatever one that they like, and that's it. So at the moment, there's a real flurry of new product development going on, different cask finishes. They're even working on like wine cask finishes, things like that, on Chivas just now. So yeah, we don't change the old products, but we bring out new ones to complement them, is the answer. And they're not always available in all markets. Some of these things get launched, and they'll launch them in specific markets only because they think, well, Mizunara, that was one. Chivas Regal Mizunara, it's a 12-year-old. Doesn't say it on the label, but it is. And that was originally just launched in Japan because they thought, well, the only people that's going to be interested in Chivas Mizunara Oak are the Japanese. And it grew in popularity. It went to available in Japan and travel retail. It was so popular in travel retail that now it's released globally, and you can buy it in the UK, specialist shops, of course. But yeah.
So what's your brand marketing for travel retail? I mean, a lot of distilleries do the travel retail. I mean, what do you look for? Because obviously, travel retail, you're going to get a mix of all over the world, because you can't target Americans, or you can't target Europe. They like a specific type of whiskey, and so how do you target a airport retail when it's people from all over the world? It's going to be an eclectic mix of different people that like different styles. So how do those kind of travel retail brands, who decides this is what we're going to put out there because we think it'll appeal to a general population of lots of people?
Yeah, just before you come in there, Tristan, I had something probably add to what Wayne was saying. And just you're talking about sort of whiskey for a Japanese market. Are you listening to the feedback, then creating the whiskey, or are you creating the whiskey, then trying to find a market?
In some cases, it's one, in other cases, it's the other. Sometimes, Sandy Hislop, our master blender, will come up with a great idea to, I can get my hands in these casks. I could do something really good with these. Let me try it and put it to you. So he'll put things to the marketing team and say, look, what do you think of this? Do you think there's a market for that? And they'll go out and find a market for it and say, yeah, let's see if it appeals to anyone. Other times it's, the customers are asking for this. So there's a real mix. It's not just a one-way street. We're listening to the customers, but as well, we're going to them and saying, hey, what do you think of this?
I think the whole process is absolutely fascinating to see how something ends up on the shelves and how it's driven to get there on the shelf. Is absolutely, for myself, really, really fascinating.
And it takes a long time, about 2 years, to get from concept to on the shelf. And, when you talk about travel retail and where do you determine where it goes, well, it's down to city pairs. We'll look at what the busy air routes are. So I think the highest value air route in the world, certainly not at the minute, but was Heathrow to JFK. So if you were wanting to sell something to appeal to an American palate, that would be something sweet right away because they like things sweet. The best place to sell that would be Heathrow. Which terminal? Well, which terminal has the most flights going to USA or going to JFK? Probably be 3 or 5. So that's how they'll determine where they'll do the promotions, and then they'll go out from there. So when we launched Mizunara into duty free, it was launched into Singapore because there was a big sort of travel corridor between Singapore and Tokyo. There was a couple of other cities in there as well that it went into that had sort of busy links between Tokyo. So that's how they look at it. They just look at the air traffic statistics and say, right, where's the Japanese guys traveling to, or where's the American traveler going to? What's the busy airports that they're in? And then that's where they target. Quite often you'll find that's just where it starts, and then it will go out from there. And sometimes you'll find particular airports will have an exclusive. They will bid for an exclusive. Some of them will tell us that they're having an exclusive, and they'll say, if you want to sell your product in our shops, you're making us an exclusive, and we've got no choice. We have to do it. Usually these exclusives end up in time coming out to the domestic market, because we will usually put a time cap on it. We'll say, well, yeah, we'll give you a travel retail exclusive, but it's only got a 2-year exclusivity period, and then it goes global.
Yeah, I think recently I came through and I got a retail exclusive on a Longmorn 25. That was at one of the airports. I can't remember whether I bought it in Aberdeen or Heathrow.
That will be Secret Speyside range.
Secret Speyside, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's now available domestically.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was. So the travel retail had a exclusivity period of 18 months on Secret Speyside. And that's now expired. It's now available domestically. It hasn't been promoted yet because there's no point because of the lockdowns. And once lockdown finishes and everything's back to normal, I think they're going to put a little bit more behind it, and it will get a proper launch the next time we've got a proper whiskey fair where people can attend it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's quite interesting, because obviously I do a lot of travel through the airports, and I've always tried to work out how the market, the branding for certain airports, because obviously the different airports I go through, you see things are heavily marketed in different places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. The marketing spend will go to where they think it's best spent, where they think the product will be put. As well, we're limited to what the amount of shelf space we have in a duty-free shop. So not every new product goes into every duty-free shop, because we don't. In some duty-free shops where you maybe have something that sells really well, you don't want to have to compromise on shelf space for that product to bring something else in that you're not quite sure it will work in that market. Duty free is it's incredibly complex and interesting as well, and we do a lot of work on training the staff. But yeah, it's a whole can of worms. We've got a whole company dedicated to distributing into duty free. So yeah.
A quick question, Tristan, on that. With the world changing as it is at the moment and things upside down due to the COVID situation, the whole travel retail market may come back or it may not. Is the distillery, and are you guys as a whole looking at that and thinking, right, so if this doesn't come back, how are we going to market our whiskey? Where are we going to go? How are we going to do this? If that market's taken away, there's going to be a place for us, but how do we do that?
Well, we don't see it disappearing. We do think it will come back. What we see, and we do a lot of research into what customers want, how customers are feeling, particularly round about the on trade, which is bars and restaurants, consumption on premise. And will people be confident enough to go back to bars and restaurants when lockdown's lifted in various countries? Will people be confident enough to travel? So a lot of research is done into that to see where we need to be aiming our marketing spend in the months and the years ahead. And everything points to the fact that people do want to get back to the airport again. People do want to travel again, and people can't wait to get to the pub and can't wait to get out for a meal again. So we very much are still going to be investing in travel retail. What we are looking at, not necessarily connected with COVID and how trends are changing around that, but this was a sort of a trend that was heading our way before COVID, was sort of boutique stores. So we are looking, you probably don't know if you've been at Heathrow Terminal 5. Macallan had their own boutique store there. It used to be the Harry Potter store, and then they took it over and it became the Macallan store. So we're looking at more things like that, not just in airports, but in large cities, particularly in China, where we see a lot of potential for growth. And in China, it's all about the bling. It's all about being seen to be drinking the big brand names. It's all about luxury and showing off that you've got money. They're a wee bit different to us Brits, and we're a little bit more, understated luxury. Let's not flash the cash. Well, we don't like to show that we have a wee bit in our pocket. Well, we're almost embarrassed to be drinking an expensive whiskey or having something too luxury or showy. But in China, it's the opposite. If you go out to a bar and you know someone in the next table and they're drinking a Chivas Regal 18, you can't drink anything less than that or be seen to drink anything less than that. So the bottle on your table has to be better than that. So it needs to be the Chivas Altus or even a Royal Salute 21. Someone else comes in, they see that has to be Royal Salute Stone of Destiny or the 50-year-old or something like that. So it's all very showy and it's all very competitive, and that's what's leading us down that route of that boutique store, almost like your Armani store or your LVMH store or something like that. And we're seeing that that's what the customer's looking for. They don't want just to go in and buy a bottle of whiskey, by the way. They want a whole experience when they go in. They want a sensory experience. They want to be taken on a trip almost to the distillery. So when we're looking at these stores, we're having to think about almost recreating that experience of being at the distillery, which is pretty hard to do. So that's something which is starting to emerge for us in China.
That's fascinating, Tristan. That competitive nature, is that, does it come with a discerning nature, or is it just 21, 22, 30, 35, or is there a discerning culture there where people go, well, hold on, the 10-year-old's better than the 12, and
it's not just the Chinese. I've been with customers in local hotels here in Speyside and seen the American tourist come in, and he'll say to the waitress, "What's the most expensive scotch you've got?" And that's what he wants, and he's determined that whatever the most expensive one is must be the best. And you and I know that can be far from the truth. And in China it's the same. It's not discerning. It's not, oh, I've tried this one and it's great. It's about the showy nature. Now for us, that's wonderful because the more expensive whiskies they're drinking, the more profit there is in it for us. But we don't take that for granted either. And there's a saying in the industry that the marketing department sell the first bottle. It's that marketing roundabout it, it's that image roundabout it that sells the first bottle. but it's the blenders and the distillers that sell all the subsequent bottles. Because you might buy the bottle because of the bling or the marketing or the brand image, but if the whiskey in that is rubbish, you're not going to buy a second one. And an example of that for me was one of the Game of Thrones bottles. I think it was a White Walker. I don't know if anyone's tried the White Walker.
That was the Johnny Walker that was designed to be put in the freezer or something, wasn't it? I think the label changed.
God.
If you
That's
put
right.
it in the freezer, something changed on the label, so it was a massive gimmick.
Yeah, it wasn't the freezer it needed to be put in. I can tell you that.
A skip.
I have. It's not. I don't like saying things about competitors. No Scotch whisky producer is out to make a bad whisky. We're all doing our best. Every distillery is doing their best to produce great whisky, and for the most part, we all get it right. But that is one where I just said, no way. And actually, that wasn't a tasting that we were doing internally with some different innovations from different distillers to put them up against what we were doing to see how we compared. And the White Walker just stood out as a terrible mistake that should never have made it into the bottle. And that's an example. And by the way, when you look at the sales figures, where we've got great data that we've got for the whole industry, and the sales peaked for that at the start, and they really dropped off. And there's lots of that in stock everywhere. They can't shift it.
I remember going through duty free a couple of years ago, and there were pallets of that.
Pallets of it.
That they were parked everywhere. Everywhere you went through duty free, there was a pallet of Johnny Walker, that particular one, that White Walker.
White Walker.
They were really plugging it with Game of Thrones going on.
Yeah, and that's an example. That's an
Mm.
example of the bottle sells the first one, and if the spirit's not good, you're not going to sell any more. So for us, it doesn't matter so much about that bling in the market. It's great they're buying it, but the quality, we're very paranoid about that, and it does have to be good, because we do want them to buy another bottle again and again.
So is there any... Sorry, Wayne. I was just going to ask that, because you know what Ben said about you can end up with thousands of bottles, cases just not bought, and I wonder whether there is a chance of a whiskey lock again, and whether there is fear amongst the the industry about there being the demand and supply, suddenly it flips the other way.
Well, things are very different now than in the 80s. In the 80s,
that's what they all say.
In the 80s, you wouldn't have had so many people who were happy to splash the money for those 25 or 30-year-olds. How many 25-year-old whiskies were there available back in the 80s? Whereas these days, people are crying out for this stuff. And actually, we would make a lot more of that stuff if we had the stocks in the warehouse. We'll make what we've got the stocks for, and that's it. So, yeah, if there's a bit of a downturn, as there has been, on-trade pretty much disappeared, travel retail disappeared, off-sales rocketed through the roof during COVID, but not quite enough to make up for your loss of bars, restaurants, and duty-free. So yeah, we have a little bit, our depletion, we call it our depletions. What's depleting from the warehouse? Our depletions are down a little bit, but that's no concern. And we've kept production going right the way through because, we're confident, unlike in the 80s, that, that spirit can stay in the cask for a few years longer because there's a market for those older whiskies building all the time. And I don't know if you remember back when in the UK we lost Glenlivet 12-year-old.
Yeah. We all do remember that.
Yeah,
For the Founders Reserve.
Founders Reserve. It's now back, I'm pleased to say.
Yeah,
And it wasn't.
true.
It wasn't because we didn't have enough 12-year-old. We did. We could have bottled that all day long, but we wouldn't have had enough in a few years' time for the 18-year-old. So the reason for Founders Reserve was, hold on, we do have to keep some stock back, because we do have to remember we've got an 18, we've got a 21, and we've got a 25-year-old to preserve stock for. And if we bottle all this at 12, in a few years' time, there's going to be no 18 or no 15 or no 21. So it wasn't about not having enough 12. It was about keeping it coming through, because those products are popular.
And that must be such a way up. It's like, okay, you might lose, Glenlivet might lose sales on the 12, but is it worth that trade-off to not lose sales of the 18 stroke, and all the rest of them? I mean, it's such a juggling act, isn't it?
I have to say, the Glenlivet has blown my socks off in the last 6 months as the Amazon exclusive. The Glenlivet illicit still, which is absolutely fantastic. It's a cast strength, and it's absolutely stunning. I think Adrian's a fan as well. I think Will is a fan as well, given the amount of bottles they've bought.
Amazon exclusive. That's an interesting marketing move. Amazon exclusive. I never twigged that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. They're a big player now, and it's just like the supermarkets, really. When you become big and powerful and have access to a big slice of the market, you can demand exclusives, and you can set the price as well.
It's a 35 quid whiskey. It should easily be 55 quid. Because it's that nice. It's absolutely lovely.
So, Tristan, are you
higher strength? Sorry, Nick.
Yep.
You're saying that forgive me, I had to duck out for most of it. I'm so sorry. Please don't be offended. But you're saying that Amazon is now a big player, like the big 4 or 5 supermarkets.
Yeah, it's getting that way. Now, they don't have the volumes that Tesco's and Sainsbury's have at the moment, but that's very much the way the trend is. We're seeing a trend for e-commerce. We've actually set up our own shop as well, called Drinks & Co, where we will sell you our competitor products as well as our own. It's all going towards e-commerce. The reason we've done that is because the supermarkets are becoming very powerful, and what they will do is they won't stock your whole range. They'll stock what they want to stock. And we might bring out a new product and want to get that to the customer, but if they say that you've had your share of our shelf space, we're just having this, and by the way, we're not paying that for it, we're paying this for it. So there's only so much of that that the industry can sustain. So you have to be spread your sort of eggs into different baskets. So yeah, try a little bit with Amazon. They're a big online retailer, and we'll dabble our toes in it a little bit ourselves. So.
Isn't illicit?
Sorry, go on. What?
I was going to say, isn't illicit still supposed to be the first of a series of bottles that are due? And are they all going to be Amazon or?
No, illicit still is the first. I think the next one's going to be called the First License or something along those lines, or the Legal Dram or something like that. So, yeah, first in a series of bottles that just try and bring our history to life a little bit. And that first one was just a little nod to the Glenlivet, the fact that it started out as an illegal distillery, an illicit distillery, just like Glenburghie did.
It'll be Glenlivet - Glenlivet.
Yeah. I've been putting it off, but should we try this old particular?
Oh, go on. Can I
yeah, exactly where I'm going.
Forgive me for being kind of late to the party and a bit of a bull in a china shop, but I just want to ask you about closures, because I've got this Chivas Michelada, and it's so interesting revisiting it in the context of this because you can really smell the Glenburghie. But I noticed that it's got a plastic twist cap, which for my mind is probably the best, gas excluder going. And I'm wondering why the hell the industry persists in cork closures for whiskies that are now in the hundreds of pounds in terms of value. What the heck is going on?
Yeah, and that's one of these ones that comes down to what the customer expects.
Yeah.
We hate them as much as you do. The blenders hate them even more because they put a lot of work into spirit quality and getting things just right, getting the consistency, making sure everything is top notch. Nosing an 18-year-old from it starts at the distillery to we send it to the customer in the bottle can be nosed and quality checked 1,000 times.
Mm.
And they get really upset whenever we stick a cork closure in it and then it gets corked and comes back with that sort of cork note.
I've had a £200. I remember 10 years ago, we had a £200 bottle of whiskey, which like for the Brighton Whiskey Club, that was like twice as much as any, and it was corked. And at first there was like a table of 20. They're going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Some people going, no, it isn't. Yours. And no, it was. And yeah.
It's totally down to that's what, and that's what all of our market research tells us. That's what the customer expects if they're paying X amount for a bottle.
More with loose corks. I mean, I've had bottles with corks practically falling out.
Mm.
And I think it's an insult, frankly.
Yeah, I've had bottles where the corks fall inside and disintegrate. It's because you're more likely to get the cork note in the whiskey than you will with the wine, because with the alcohol strength so much higher, it will draw that impurity out of the cork. It will draw it into the whiskey. So your quality control with the cork closures has to be really tight, but even then, you still get the odd rogue one going through, and it's a real shame. But on the other hand, I love nothing more than hearing the sound of.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, it's a nice sound.
So that's what we like, the romance of it, and also with every screw cap comes a little bit of plastic, and if we're going to reduce plastics, then we need to think of maybe a little bit of cork underneath the screw cap. There you go, perfect.
Yeah,
the only one that's a screw cap is actually the oldest one. The rest are all cork and plastic.
The distillery bottle.
That's the best of the night for me. The first one, the old and rare. I mean, if you said that was from the 1970s, Will, I'd have believed that.
What do we think of Old Particular then, the 21?
I can't believe it's so soft on the palate, at 51.5%.
Actually,
it's not as destructive as I thought.
It's not as bad as I thought either, actually, no?
Yeah, I think...
For me, I was going to say, the nose and the palate are quite detached.
Pickled onions.
Yeah.
Alex.
There's no pickled onions in there, Kenneth. It's got that sort of lovely sweetness, that fruitiness. It's not...
We're drinking the same one here, Old Particular, sorry.
Old Particular, yeah.
I agree with you there, Ben, that the palate and the nose are completely detached for me.
Yeah.
The palate is lovely. The nose is kind of a little bit of the old stinky. Not quite.
A bit of the farmyard about it. A bit of the
horse blankets. Wet
is there
dog.
a slight? Is there a slight? It's not smoky. Is it sort of like the cask has had a really heavily charred cask or something like that?
No, I think I get a bit of salt out of this as well. Bit of
sort of
fininess.
In the nose, there's a slight bit of Swan Vesta, sparks Swan Vesta.
Yes,
they've been sitting in the ashtray a wee bit longer.
I was almost thinking someone had been smoking a cigarette that they shouldn't have been, one of those funny ones. That sort of.
I mean, for me, this is actually the essence of Glenburghie, because it's like you never know quite what to expect, and you may get a bit of rum funk, but underneath it all, there's fantastic tropical fruits and lavender, and sort of depth and length. And it's always one of my. No two Glenburgies are ever the same. And yeah, I think that even though this one is really what I call genuinely stinky, it's actually. I mean, I like the connoisseur's choice is the one that possibly pips it. But in terms of Glenburghie with a capital G and a capital B, this is kind of what epitomizes it. It's sort of dangerous. When it's good, it's bloody amazing. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
No, that's a good point there, Nick, and I agree with you on that. That G&M just about.
Exchange 21-year-old Glenburghie, 80 quid in whenever it was, bloody
October
2019. This is just outstanding. It's like pouring, it's like a mix of all six. It's just beautiful.
My three favourite in order is probably Cadenhead's, then the distillery one, and then the G&M connoisseur's choice.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I must admit,
Those
the
three,
Cadenheads for me.
And I just like the fact as well on the G&M one that it's so close to the distillery, you know, even closer than our filling and warehousing facilities. So it's all kept quite local.
The problem with the Cadenheads and the SMWS is that they're both a bit sort of casky. The Cadenhead's just like boring bourbon, you know, and the SMWS is just a bit weird and doesn't really reflect Glenburghie. You know.
See, I still quite like boring bourbon. So I still find that Connoisseur's Choice one, there's still that little there's still a little meatiness, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
On the nose.
I think that was the one for me as well, the Gordon MacPhail Connoisseur's Choice 20-year-old. I think that was my favourite.
So we have a vote then, guys.
Oh yeah. 3, 2, and 1. Gold, silver, and bronze. In third place.
Oh no, look.
Oh, there we go, brilliant. Here we go.
Brilliant. Holy shit. Oh no. Hang on, we're one missing.
No, it's not.
No, you've got an extra one, Nick.
We don't have the whiskey exchange Black Friday on the tasting. That's just your version.
Yeah, okay.
You've got a
private we could vote for our favourite then, to put that up again and vote for a second best as well.
This is really hard.
Nice.
I've got
you're a legend.
Signatory. The other one I've got is a Signatory 17-year-old, but it's half gone, so I couldn't put it into here. But Nick has some of it, so.
Oh, mate, thank you. Thank you so much. I didn't realise I was special.
So are we all done voting?
No.
Yeah. Can we do number 2 and 3?
We could vote for our first one, then after that we could put it back up again and vote for a second favourite as well.
Well, there is a definite clear winner here.
Hang on.
Right.
Okay, go on. Done it.
Let's see it.
G&M, I would say.
Yeah, I think the Cadenhead's probably.
Okay.
Funky.
Cadenhead's a clear
monsters. You absolute monsters.
So SMWS didn't get anywhere.
How do you take
Look at the distillery own. What are you guys like?
You press function print screen or what? There you
Yeah.
go.
Just
Okay, so let's go with your second.
Second one.
Oh, that's easy.
Second. And we're doing third as well, Wayne.
If you want, yeah, we can do.
Let's do 1, 2, and 3.
Single transferable vote.
Alex, you can't just keep pressing the same button for distillery.
No, it will be 3 different ones.
Oh, particularly on the nose, it's turning into oxo cubes with a little bit of curry powder on top on the nose.
Okay, that's 2 done.
I'm getting when you say oxo cube, Kenny, I'm with you there.
There we
Oh,
go. Number
pickled
10.
onions. Here we go.
Mm.
It's between the 15 and the 20, isn't it?
It is,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
But hang on, we really need to see the prices on this as well while we're at it, to be honest.
Okay, let's go for number 3 then.
Number 3.
What the fuck?
You can't buy these anymore, Nick. The prices are irrelevant. It's all secondary market now.
They're all a bit pricey anyway. What the? Well, fuck it.
I'm gonna hunt down the 15-year-old, and Will and I will compete online.
I didn't even in
I've got a deal for you, Will. I've got a 10-year-old Dufton, which I think you will love. It's in the same ballpark.
There was another of the 15-year-old in one of the little auctions this week, and it went up to 65 or 70, and I thought, nah, I've got another bottle still, so I'll leave it. But yeah.
Oh look, it's the same
There we go, number
story.
3.
Yeah.
So there we go.
I mean, Tristan, you're spot on with your 1, 2, 3. I'm
Same
totally
three,
there
isn't
with
it?
you on that.
It's
I'm
basically
glad.
the same 3, isn't it? Each time.
You're absolutely spot on, and thank you for all your insights. Because actually, for me, Glenburghie is a workhorse distillery. It's a new distillery. 2005, whatever you said it was, the year. It's a workhorse distillery, but actually, the story behind it is the whiskey industry globally, and that's really what the story is.
It is.
About the sales and all the marketing, and it's so intricate. And
Yeah, that's what struck me as well, Alex. It's about how the data and how public opinion and market forces can all sort of come together in the specific nature of individual airports and how that can determine what products go there and to what degree the products go there. It's almost a science, but we looked at sort of 2 sciences tonight. The science of the sort of consistent spirit across different independent bottlers, but also the science of marketing and getting the correct product to the specific individual markets is absolutely, it's fascinating, but at the same time it's mind-blowing as well. And to have those plates
weekly
spinning at the same
tasting,
time in order to create all that and tick those boxes in order to meet that demand in specific markets is totally fascinating for me.
Well, I think one of the things for me was quite a few years ago, my nephew used to work as a manager for a duty-free airport.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking to him about the whiskies that he would stock. Just as you would said, Tristan, you would teach people about, brand awareness for your brands. And he'd actually just been on a brand awareness course for one of the whiskies that his duty-free was stocking. And because he was the duty-free manager, he got to go to like a distillery tour and whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention the particular brand, but one of the things
not on the BBC now way,
because he had quite a lot of bottles that were in the 18 to 20,000 pound benchmark at his retail outlet. And I said to him one night as we were drinking one of these really good Davidoff whiskies, I said, surely you can't actually sell an awful lot of these things at 18 to 20,000 pounds because it's not your average retailers. And he says, you know what? He says, we actually sell them weekly.
Mm.
And what it was Japanese and American businessmen that bought them on their corporate credit card for clinching a deal. You sign a deal, you get your 20,000 pound whiskey out, share it. And I was kind of gobsmacked. I'm like, I never even thought of that. I thought everything here was bought by people, not by business executives for the company.
Were they good?
Corporate credit card.
Were they good, Wayne?
Yeah, the whiskey we had was really good because I actually I lost my legs that night. Actually, it was one of those nights where I just, you know what, the whole top is compass mentis, but the bottom has no idea what's going on. It's trying to walk backwards when you're going forwards. So yeah, it was a good night.
I've got a little something for you all as well. I know we're virtual, but thought what can I do? If any of you are interested in the Distillery Reserve collection, those cask strength bottles, we sell them at Glenlivet.com from the brand website, from Aberlour.com, from Chivas.com for the Strathisla ones, the Long Morning, the Brave Al. I've set up a little discount code for you all. I'll pop it into the chat. It's Sussex WAG, Whiskey Appreciation Group. So if you pop that discount code in when if you are online at any of the shops in the links there, it'll get you 10% off at checkout, and that code is valid to the 1st of April. If you're wanting any bottles from the shop, any of the distillery exclusive. Normally, they would only be available if you visited, but because the distilleries are all shut, they're selling them online. So give you a discount there.
Well, thanks, Tristan.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining me. I'm just sorry
Tristan.
we didn't have a distillery reserve for Glenburghie this year, because that would have been interesting to try against the other bottles as well. A cask strength would have been great, but these were all fantastic.
And the new mate.
And the new mate, that would have been even better. Maybe
God, yeah.
maybe next time. Well, if we're doing another one on
Right.
another brand or another distillery sometime, remind me, and I'll try and get you a new make sent down, and we could.
I'm sure we'd all like deconstruction of the Ballantines. That would be an amazing tasting,
Oh my God.
Oh, 40 of them.
Yes.
All 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Better set a couple of days aside for that one.
Tristan, do you know how difficult it actually is to get new make from whiskey brands?
I know.
It's almost like a coveted thing with some brands. Some brands are quite happy to throw them out, but with some brands, it's like, oh no, we never release that. There's no way you're going to get that. And it's like some sort of coveted secret ingredient.
You have to ask yourself, why do they not want you to try it?
Aye. Yeah. Quite right.
Sometimes they'll have good reason, but it isn't the easiest thing to get, even for me. But I have been known from time to time to, persuade the right person and get a sample bottle of it. Yeah, it's quite interesting to try it against the aged spirit, and you can see, that distillery character, and it's.
Well, I think for us as a whiskey club to identify that distillery character initially, before you go through a tasting, that is one of the things that identifies and kind of gets your benchmark before you can actually taste it. And I think that's great, but there's so few distilleries will actually allow you to do that. And I just don't understand why.
Yeah.
Because we all love that benchmark. I mean, that basic where we know that the distillery character is, we can get that undetermined distillery character, and then everything afterwards is just cask influence or whatever you want to put into it, really.
Yeah. Yeah, so but I've tried most of the distillery new make spirits that we have, and it's an interesting experiment. I think one of my favourites is Strathisla. That's a good one to try. We could do that sometimes. Yeah. Strathisla is the oldest distillery operating distillery in the Highlands, 1786. The stills are quite short, so it gives you a very, very robust new make spirit, loads of flavour coming through in the new make at Strathisla. So I think that's why it's one of my favourite new makes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, any other questions on Glenburghie or anything else that you want to know?
Gosh,
It's been a great
it's
night.
very
There's nearly 10 o'clock. I didn't notice the time going by.
Normally, this is normally early for a Friday night. Normally we're here at 1 o'clock, 2 in the
Oh.
morning.
Well, the thing
No.
is, we do have a few whiskey nerds on it, and people that want to know the ins and outs of the brands, as you probably realised tonight, with some of the questions. But for me, I'd just like to thank you, Tristan. I'd like to thank you, Will, for setting this up. It's been a great insight to Glenburghie and the brand. Had a brilliant night.
Yeah.
Whiskeys were
Yeah.
great.
Hey, can I ask Tristan, just as a final question? I mean, tonight we've sort of discovered, as we probably knew, that a lot of blends have really, really great, solid whiskies and added to them, you know, that create this sort of concoction and combination. Why do you think a lot of whiskey snobs or whiskey purists, probably to be fairer to them, have such a downer on blended whiskey? Is it to do with the ABV? Is it to do with perception? Is it being inferior to maybe, say, single cask or whatever else?
It's a good question, and probably there'll be, if you asked, if you got a lot of whiskey purists or snobs in a room and asked them all, they might have a slightly different answer or explanation for you. Some of the ones I've came across are, you know, oh, it's got grain, it's just bulked out with grain whiskey. On a blend, absolutely correct. There's grain whiskey there. It's not just there to bulk it out. It's there to, you know, help bring those flavours together. There's some fantastic grain whiskies in Scotland from, you know, not just our 7 operating grain distilleries, but ones that are lost now as well. And if you give them time and good casks to age, you do get a great dram from a grain distillery as well. And that's not to be written off. Some of the other things we get is, yeah, you're right, Kenny, you know, it's not full strength, or it's been chill filtered, or there's caramel colouring, or, you know, I can taste the fact that it's been watered down with, you know, substandard water. There's always some daft reason, which if they knew the full procedure and process that we go through, it would dispel any of these myths. And then, of course, they think that some of these distilleries like Glenburghie or Breval, or ones that you never really hear of that go for blending, or they're not any good. They're just going for blending because they're not any good. You know, and now I think it's absolutely wonderful that we're kind of opening the doors to this. We're kind of saying, well, no, try them. You tell me what you think. And of course, everyone has a different preference. Not everyone will think that Glenburghie is the best single malt they've ever tasted, or Breval's the best single malt they've ever tasted. But there's no denying that the quality is there, and that's down to the guys that work, you know, in the distillery. The pride that they have. In every, you know, of our 133 distilleries in Scotland, that's the case, not just at ours. You know, the guys that work there have a wonderful pride in their work. They want to make the best whiskey. They want to make the person that's enjoying the dram have a great experience. And our blenders are the same, and they take that to a whole other level in wanting to produce something that's great. And some of it, you know, as well, is just a big misunderstanding. Some of it is these people want to make you think that they know something about whiskey, but they don't actually know anything about it at all. You know, they'll come away with these statements, oh, I only drank single malt, because they heard someone in a bar years ago saying that or something. You know, but
I think there's also the element of seeing it as being sort of lowest common denominator Scotch, which is not, you know, which a lot of blended whiskies aren't lowest common denominator Scotches.
No. Maybe some blends get a bad name because of, you know, some of the cheaper blends maybe aren't the best, you know, and I'm thinking here supermarket owned brands, things like that you can pick up pretty cheaply, and things like they're blended Scotch, and therefore some people tar all blended Scotch with with that brush, or it's at the cheaper end of the market. Yeah, you can get the cheaper end of the market, and maybe 90% of that blend is made up with a cheap grain whiskey that's been aged for the minimum 3 years. There's no age statement on the bottle. There's no sort of guarantee of quality. But you take most of the blends that are out there, 90% of Scotch sold around the world is blended Scotch whiskey. And these big blends like Johnny Walker, like Ballantine's, like Chivas Regal, like Royal Salute, they're popular for a reason, and it's because they're good and people enjoy drinking them.
I think a lot of these malts are also highly regarded because they are so easily blended that they can throw them into different blends and turn them into. So they're very versatile malts, aren't they? But I would be very open if we can organise a Bravo tasting as well, because I think that's a really underrated distillery as well.
And Altabane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Black Bottle.
So if we get a bit of Bravo going, I think there's the unsung heroes of the whiskey world are the plain old-fashioned barley. It's easy to get into a sort of competitive, beggar thy neighbour over sherry, and the same over peat. And what people overlook is the subtlety of ordinary barley, Springbank local barley, Glenlossie, Linkwood, even Glen Ord even. They all kind of, a lot of the sort of Scapa even. In fact, let's say Tullibardine.
Milton Duff, Glencadden.
Missing a bloody trick over the fact that it's basically barley vodka aged in oak. And if you leave the peat behind and leave the sherry behind, then you're into a real competition. End of rant over. But
I think that'd be a great. I think that'd be a great taste, and focus on the sort of overlooked and under-regarded but quality distilleries in Scotland would be a great one to do.
And I think Glenburghie, funny, and maybe some old distilleries. I hesitate to mention Annock, but Glenburghie is one of the distilleries that sits in a sort of middle field because it's full of character, it's full of variability, and that's kind of what we want. You never know quite what you're going to get. But equally, the sort of essence of barley is an impossible market to capture. So what do you think, Tristan? I mean, where's the entry to that? Because I like French whiskey, for example, which can often emphasize the barley more, and look at perhaps Scandinavian whiskey, which tends to leave the sherry and peat behind. And I wonder whether Scotch is kind of slightly getting lost in that sort of bit of the pie chart.
Yeah, I think the thing with Scotch is because there's so many distilleries and everyone's trying to do something a little bit different. There's this, it's playing with different cask types as the innovation. And we just had the change in the rules a couple of years ago there to allow more innovation with casks, which we've jumped on because it's great for new customers. But
it's not about
you're right. When you strip it back to, the bare bones, that's when you get to see the real distillery character coming through. And that's when you can make real judgment calls on what's my favourite distillery and how much character a distillery actually has before we bring in all these different cask types to play all these different tunes. You're right. Scapa's great for it. Brave Al's great for it too. Loads of distilleries in Scotland actually wonderful if you try, that just standard sort of American oak barrel, not too long in the cask, and get the flavours coming through. So that'd be a very interesting tasting. I'd be happy to conduct something with some of our distilleries. I'm thinking Longmore's a great one. Someone mentioned Altabane or Altafania. Brave Al, wonderful distilleries. One that's difficult to get is a great one, Glentocher's. It's our training distillery, and because it's a training distillery, it's totally manual. It's the only distillery, apart from Scapa, which isn't automated and computerized, because that's where we send everyone to learn how to do it properly, because the computers break down. And if you're sitting at Glenlivet operating the computers and clicking the mouse and making it do everything, when the computer crashes, you need to know what you're doing to run about and open all the valves manually and do all that. So that's where they all learn, is Glen Talkers. So that's a great one to get, because you can see it's a totally manually produced spirit. Beautiful flavors, soft fruits there coming through as well, soft berries and things coming through in that one. Not dissimilar to Glenburghie in that respect.
I've got a bombshell for you, Tristan. So check this out. So brace yourself. So what you were saying, 1980s whiskey lot late, and in order to demand was low, supply was high, but loads of malt, reduce the grain. How about now? What's the situation now where demand is just outstripping? It's just like you can't make it quick enough. So in a cynical kind of view, is this perhaps the worst of times, best of times situation, where we've never seen more distilleries, more cask this and that, and more choice and all of that, but perhaps it's a bit of the case of like, well, let's just take up the age and give them younger stuff and branding and all this. What's your take on that? And I mean, it's a question for anyone really. I mean, what's the take on the industry, and whether it's a cynical and whether we're in the best of times, worst of times? Yeah, I guess that is my question. I'm always thinking that.
I think that really depends. Every distillery will be different in that regard. Some distilleries will have planned ahead, they'll have forecasted properly, they'll have enough stocks to see us through these times of high demand. Other distilleries will have been more conservative and perhaps having a difficult time. And that's, I alluded to it earlier. That's where Glenlivet was a few years ago when 12 disappeared. Okay, and it wasn't because we didn't have enough 12, but we could have bottled it, and then in a few years' time, I'm sorry guys, there's no 18 anymore, and a lot of disappointed customers there. So that's why we got Founders Reserve. 12's now back, but Founders remains popular, and it's staying around as a permanent fixture. But I think what you see now is, we've extended the Glenlivet distillery again. It went from, when I joined the company in 2007, it was producing 5.5 million litres of new make spirit a year. It went up in 2009, we doubled the capacity up to 10.5 million litres of spirit a year. And just last year, we commissioned the other extension, which doubles it again. We're now at 21 million litres of spirit per year. And that building was built with planning permission and with the design of doubling that again, doubling that extension. And that can take us up to 31 million litres of spirit a year. That we haven't started building that yet, but it's on the cards, because that's the way demand for single malt is going. Aberlour Distillery, the plan is, and in a couple of years' time, we just demolished an old warehouse at Aberlour, and the plan is then to use that space to extend the still house, add another couple of stills, and another 4 stills, and double the capacity at Aberlour, because that's a single malt that we're seeing the popularity increase big time. So it's where you're at. It's the approach you've taken. Every distillery is different, and we are bringing out a lot of new products. But I would defend what we're doing in that most of the new stuff we're bringing out does have age statements on them. Most of the new Chivas Regals we're bringing out all have age statements of 13. We are converting one of our non-age statement whiskies to an age statement because it's Chivas Regal Altus. I don't know if you know, it's a blended malt, which is particularly good, but we've had a hard sell with it. It's difficult for us to communicate that product to the customer because they know Chivas as a brand where there's an age on the bottle, and they say, why am I paying more for this? what age is it? That's what they're asking. So the age is going on. I think it's either 20 or 21. I think it's maybe 20-year-old age statement. Now, there's a whiskey in there that's a lot older. But you know as well as I, when you put an age on the bottle, it has to be the age of the youngest spirit.
So that's going to beg to a question about the non-age statement kind of environment where everybody was going down a couple of years ago. Has that been looked at on as a success? Obviously, you guys are going back to your age statements. Is that because people want ages, or is it more to make it an understanding for people?
It's more of an understanding, and some of that's our fault, really, because if we go back even further, probably about 10 years ago, before we brought in Founders Reserve and stuff like that, we were communicating to people about age statements and educating them about age statements and telling them, you know, age matters. And so they look for it now. So it's really, we've got nobody but ourselves to blame. And, you know, there's a little bit of truth in that. Of course, age does matter. And it's great, you know, to have that age guarantee on the bottle. And it gives me reassurance. I like it as well. I like to know, I like to look at it and sip the spirit and think, oh, this was distilled, you know, back 12 years ago or 18 years ago. And I like to sit and think about what I might have been doing, or would I have been around the distillery when they were making that. I love that. But as well, you know, with the non-age statement, what you're getting there is you're getting the blenders not being tied to a particular age. You're getting to see their full, you know, creativity coming to the fore, you know, playing with the different, not just different cask types, but different ages of spirit, saying, oh, you see that Strathisla? You see it at 10 years old, it's very vibrant, you're getting loads of that distillery character through. What if we mixed that with some Strathisla, maybe at 18 years old in this particular second fill cask? And what would we get with that? Well, you get a wonderful whiskey, but you're not necessarily going to bring that to fruition if everyone is determined to drink a bottle with an age statement on it. Because if you
I do get that, because a lot of the new whiskies coming out, young world whiskies, you know, 3, 4, 5-year-old, people are loving them. But I also see the other side where people are not particularly enjoying the non-age statements. That's the kind of drift I get in the whiskey world, is nobody wants non-age statements. They want age statements. They want to know what they're drinking. But at the same time, people are quite happy to go down and buy 3-year-old, 4-year-old whiskies straight out of a distillery and pay premium prices for them. And that kind of confuses me. It's like, but you want age statements because you don't want NAS bottles. You know, that's the kind of thing. But you're quite happy to buy a 3-year-old at £300 on the auction site because that's what you want. And I can't quite get that drift. Either you're happy about a young whiskey or you want an old whiskey. I don't understand where that kind of thing is going from.
Forgive me, I think that there are two separate issues. There's demand and supply versus, you know, perceptions of quality. And I think they're, you know, if people want to pay lots for 3- and 4-year-old whiskey, that's one thing. And if people, you know, want to pay more for 15 and 21, that's a slightly separate thing, maybe.
And with a non-age statement, you know, you can have that big range of ages. You could have a 10-year-old in there. You could have a 20-year-old in there. But if you're going to put an age in the bottle, it has to be the age of the youngest whiskey in the bottle. And if you put 10 on the bottle and say, oh, that's £300, the customer will go, £300 for a 10-year-old. And you say, but there's 20-year-old whiskey in that. They go, but it says 10 on the bottle. So that's where non-age statement comes into play, because, you know, you're not having to refer to that youngest whiskey. And when you put that youngest whiskey age in the bottle, that sets, you know, a preconceived notion of what the price should be in the customer's head rather than
I mean,
thinking of the
you as a
overall.
brand, did you actually find that when you were going into the non-age statement, did you find a dropping off of people buying those non-age statements because they weren't happy with it? Or did you find it like a consistency where people know that, well, yeah, we know what this is, so we're not really bothered if they put an age on it? Because I think that makes a big difference is to your client-based purchase.
Yeah, it kind of both, to be honest, Wayne. So up at that high end with the Chivas Altus that I said is getting an age statement, what we find at that price point, people want an age statement. They're saying, why am I paying more for this? You know, and you need to tell me. So now we're putting the age on it.
Is that because you want to show the bottle off and they say, this is 21, 22?
They want to talk about it. It's not good enough that it's just 5 exclusive malts or whatever. They want to know. They want a guarantee, and that age seems to be their guarantee of quality for the price. But other ones like Founders Reserve, obviously from Glenlivet, didn't have an age statement. You know, that was the best selling new product release we've ever had. And that's why when 12 came back, it's hanging around because there's a customer for that loves it, and the price point on it suits people.
But is that because of the price point, or is it because of the branding?
I think it's a little bit of both. You know, if the price point was much higher, people wouldn't be happy with no age being on the bottle. But at that price point, and with the Glenlivet branding, that sort of guarantee of quality, it's a Glenlivet whiskey, it works and people buy it, and in very high volumes as well. So that's why it's sticking around. It's worked. That's one that does. The high end, not so much. You're wanting to charge, a good price for your whiskey. People expect the age in the bottle.
So I think
it was a very confusing time 5-6 years ago. Everything was 10, 12, 15, 18, 21, 25. And then all of a sudden, within a year, it was just this kind of NAS story, marketing. And I mean, we all witnessed it, didn't we? And it was just like, what's going on? And of course, we grabbed onto these kind of, whoa. Why is a younger whiskey going up and all that kind of thing? But
now we're bringing out whiskies with age statements younger. Now we're, Valentine's 7 just launched the other year.
Yeah, 3-year-olds, it's all sorts of, stuff going on. Tristan, when was the first time? Sorry, Wayne, I was just going to ask.
Time though, wasn't it, when all these no age statements started coming out, and everybody was kind of like, well, I'm not really sure how to take this because I'm not really sure what I'm drinking. But a lot of them are actually a lot older than what people were expecting were in it. A lot of people thought, well, they're trying to hide kind of 3-4-year-old whiskies, when in reality, a lot of them were kind of 14, 15-year-old whiskies, but they were using that blending process of throwing some high ABV young whiskey to rejuvenate some older casks, which has probably lost a little bit of its luster, which worked. But
I agree with that.
Yeah,
there was also a cynical move as well, because there was the Diageo line was flavor driven. Do you remember that whole flavor driven Diageo thing? And it was like, here's also an opportunity to sell loads of young whiskey as well. So exactly what you're saying, Wayne, and also an opportunity to go, well, if we just flog loads of really young whiskey and you put it in the fridge, the freezer, all that kind of thing.
Like Alec, I always thought that NAS whiskies always sort of stacked the cards in favour of the distillery, and they gave them flexibility to actually what they did month on month or batch on batch to tweak and change and not be tied to having a minimum age, say a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old whiskey in the blend.
But I think at the end of it, the purchaser has dictated what they want, isn't it? Because your age statements are coming back. And I think that is kind of the reciprocal question to that is, this is what we're going to put out, but the purchaser has turned around and says, that's not really what we want. And I think that's why your age statements are coming back, because
wasn't what the purchaser wanted. And yeah, I agree with you, Kenny. The distilleries had a lot more flexibility in getting away, but I don't think the purchaser was ultimately happy with it. They wanted an age statement, and I think that's why we're seeing it coming
And
back.
I think you can see that the way that new distilleries can sort of build up and create pented up demand, like Daft Mill. Everyone knew that Daft Mill were coming on, but they didn't do as Bimber did, and at 3 years and a day put out batches of cask strength whiskey. What they did was they hung back until it was 10-year-old, until it was 12-year-old, and by that time people were champing at the bit. So therefore you get this idea of Daft Mill sell out even before they go online.
How's sorry, what Kenny? Because what you just said there reminded me of Dalmarnock, and that's a Chivas Pernod Ricard distillery, isn't it, Tristan?
Yeah, it's our newest one.
That's the newest one.
10 million litre capacity a year, mostly for blending. We do have, well, we did have a distillery reserve bottling of that when it was 3 years old. There we go.
Just got delivered today.
Independent bottler, yeah. We did have whenever it became 3 years old, we did have a distillery reserve, and it sold out pretty much instantly as soon as it hit the shelves. For no other reason, I suspect, than, you know, it's the new kid on the block, and everyone wanted to try some spirit from the distillery. I was lucky enough to get to try it because at the Spirit Speyside Whiskey Festival, I included it in one of my off the beaten track tours, and we had a dram at each distillery as we went along. Beautiful whiskey, and I've tried the new make as well there, and I can't remember exactly off the top of my head the flavors from it, but very nice. But you won't get a Dalmarnock coming out from us anytime soon, apart from maybe the odd distillery reserve. It's all for blending, and mostly blending into our scotches for the Indian market, 100 Pipers.
What?
There it is.
Tristan, can I slightly change the subject and say, Tristan, because I know it's getting on a bit, but I want to ask a final question, which is, do you think COVID has actually been good for the whiskey industry in the sense that, you know, you can do unlimited amounts of Zoom tastings, whereas festivals are here, there, and, you know, do you think has COVID been good for whiskey?
Oh, I don't know. It has been good in this respect. Yeah, if it wasn't for COVID, would we all be chatting here tonight on this call? Would I be talking to you about Glenburghie? Probably not. So yeah, there was very little of this went on before. I certainly didn't do any of this. It was all live tastings. On the other hand, this is great that we can all get together, but I still think there's nothing that quite replaces all being in a room together with the bottles and the drams and having a good chat in the room together. Even better if it's at the distillery, you know. But it probably makes it more accessible for people. Maybe people further afield who traveling to the UK to visit the distilleries in Scotland would just be unreachable for them. So it's probably been good from that respect, and maybe made it a bit more accessible. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think.
Sorry, Nick. Personal question to Tristan. I'm wondering at what point that you were sitting in a pub having a nice life, and then suddenly you went, "Oh God, I'm going to be talking to strangers about whiskey now." It's 13, 14 years at Chivas, but there must have been a point where you were, I don't know, at school, college, university, whatever, studying not whiskey, I'd imagine. What were you studying? What your dreams and hopes, you know, personal and then when was the switch to I'm promoting whiskey?
Probably like most of you guys, when I was at school, the careers officer didn't tell me that there was such a thing as a whiskey brand ambassador. You know,
Damn, that's the problem.
it's the problem. It was very much a case of, you know, now son, what do you want to be? A joiner or a plumber or an electrician?
Yeah.
There's great apprenticeships, and so no, there was none of this. I joined the company not as a brand ambassador, but I joined back in 2007 as the fleet manager, and company cars and vans were
Wow.
320 fleet of vehicles was my responsibility. And 7 years later, I find myself chatting to customers, enthusiasts, consumers about our brands. And that's just because Chivas Brothers is one of these environments where, you know, when they see that someone's passionate about something, and if they see someone's got a particular talent for something, they do like to encourage that, and they see it through. So yeah, I was very
Sounds like they're
lucky.
good people to work for.
Yeah, they have been very good to me. It's been a very quick 14 years. Maybe not this last year, right enough. Sitting in front of a laptop in my spare room, but normally it's.
You've had to go out and buy a green blanket to hang on the wall or something.
Yeah, they've got me a green screen, but it's a bit fiddly to put up. So yeah.
Yeah, gosh.
Well,
Thanks so much, Tristan.
You're
Amazing.
very welcome. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully you'll find something to your taste on the Distillery Reserve Collection, and hopefully we'll be together again sometime, maybe for another tasting. Never mind another tasting online. I'd love to see you all sometime up at the distilleries in Speyside. Why don't we all finish? Well, I'll finish, but maybe you'll stay online and chat and discuss a while longer. But why not? Let's lift our favourite dram, Cadenheads, I think it was for me, and let's do a little traditional Scottish toast, which of course is Slàinte to your good health.
Yeah.
And a toast to being together again sometime for more fantastic whiskey and maybe visiting the distillery. Slàinte.
Slàinte.
Thanks for giving up your Friday night, Tristan. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
You're welcome. It's a nice finish to the week for me. That's me on holiday now until Tuesday the whatever of April. I can't remember. So 6th of April, that's it. So it's been a pleasure, guys, and I wish your whiskey club every success. And I know you'll drink plenty more drams together over the years, and hopefully a few more from Chivas Brothers as well. So there you go.
Thanks
Well
ever so
played,
much.
Tristan.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome. Cheers. Guys. Bye-bye.
Tristan, and
Tristan.
also thanks, Will, for organising this. Been a brilliant evening. I do hope, Tristan, we can get back on with you. I would certainly love a Bravo tasting, because I think that's a very underrated taste.
Milton's off.
And
yeah, exactly.
As
that's 3
Ty
tastings
said,
you've got to come back for.
Thanks for giving your evening up to us and putting up with us on this evening. I hope we haven't tried to give you too many hard questions.
No questions hard. We don't hide anything.
Usually have loads of questions written up that kind of daunt some of the people. But yeah, thanks a lot for your evening, and thanks for spending it with us. Will, brilliant. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys.
As you enjoyed it.
Cheers.
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 Cheers. We're hanging back.
Oh, what a nice guy.
That was a lovely tasting. Well done, Will. That was great.
Yeah. Cheers, Will.